Chapter 404. In the ancient legends of Orlodiadon, the creator of this world was a group of giants that covered the sky. And in the Ghostwind Plains, there was a gigantic beast that was their most trusted warrior. Its body was incomparably tall, and it could walk across this plain in 15 breaths. Its claws and teeth were incomparably sharp, and even the cliffs could not stop its attack. When it roared in anger, the entire plain would tremble. Let's not talk about legends for now. The Eternal Thunder Tribe's culture is incredibly primitive. We even discovered hieroglyphs and murals. Most of their records were passed down orally. In some places, the tiger god Seal's power has already surpassed that of the creator gods. Of course, that's absolutely impossible. But based on our excavations of its bones and the construction of its original structure, it was estimated that this beast was more than 10 times the size of an ancient dragon. That means that it was at least 100 feet long. Some of the records seem to be true. It was capable of casually swallowing a dragon whole. What a terrifying monster! This entire plains had become an archaeological site. Numerous excavation teams were busy helping me find the remaining bones to reconstruct this gigantic beast. And all I had to do was maintain a basic soul-summoning spell and use the attraction between the bones to guide my subordinates to where the other parts of the beast were hidden. This is truly a gigantic building puzzle game. Timlad's exclamation was quite fitting of his age. Actually, he was becoming more and more important in our faction. Many inconceivable technical difficulties had been easily solved by him. I didn't even know what level his research level had reached, but it was certain that he was far more advanced than anyone in the game's history. If this was a jigsaw puzzle, then this would definitely be a rib. Even its rib is so much taller than me. This beast is truly a terrifying beast. Venerated Archmage, this isn't a rib. It's a fingernail. The one making a fuss over nothing was the old child Cade who refused to leave. The dragon that brought him here had left him here, so Cade decided to stay here as well. Doesn't that mean that he's a moving mountain when he stands up? Nothing would be able to block a single attack from him. Even his battle pet is so powerful. Just how powerful is Master Titan? Yeah, if it's possible, I don't want to fight the Titan giants at all. Even though the elemental essence was now in balance, and the speed at which the seals were being unraveled was greatly decreasing, the Titan giants' return was still something that couldn't be stopped. The Titan giants' clones and incarnations were already capable of roaming the mortal plane. Naturally, they would be able to cause trouble in Dragon World as well. Anyone who tried to stop them from unraveling their seals would naturally become their mortal enemy. Transforming this gigantic beast into an undead creature would not only allow one to understand the Titan's strength, but it would also be an excellent material that no necromancer would be able to resist. As long as it can move, even if it's just a skeleton soldier that can only punch and kick, it's already almost invincible. Titan Eanes, just how ridiculous is he? Generally speaking, a creature's strength was directly linked to its body size, and its body size was related to the environment it grew in and the conditions of the world. The cruel nature would naturally eliminate existences that could not adapt to the world. Sounds confusing? Let's just get straight to the point. Under the same conditions of oxygen, gravity, temperature, and so on, most creatures wouldn't have much difference in size in order to adapt to the environment. Lions, tigers, elephants, and so on were all of the same species. Every creature had its own reason for existing. In Eichi's world, high magic was the only requirement for a gigantic creature to survive. If the environment changed, such a creature would naturally have no chance of surviving. That was to say, even if a gigantic beast was raised, its heart and internal circulatory system would be unable to adapt to the environment, and it was likely that it would die of heart failure in a short period of time. Of course, there were also existences that seemed to be exceptions, such as giants and dragons. However, they were actually in line with this rule as well. After all, they lived in an era that was called the immemorial era, and they were able to exist mostly because they weren't pure wild beasts. They were magical beasts that could control the power of the element. And in H's universe, there were many such examples, such as the giant ink octopus in the deep sea, the giant sandworms in the earth elemental plane, and the half-elemental heaven whale. However, the reason they were able to grow so large was because of their biological structure and living environment. These types of ancient existences were often given the laudatory names of gold bloodlines and diamond bloodlines. They were born with the power to control magic, and magic and mysteries flowed within their bloodlines. They were able to control their natural abilities and use their natural magic. This was something that other species would never be able to achieve even if they worked hard for their entire lives. However, there were always advantages and disadvantages to everything. They were used to living in a high elemental tide, so they were unable to adapt to the low magic level. If a human's blood sugar was too low, they would become sleepy. If a dragon's blood's mana density was too low, they would also become sleepy. Only the ancient artifacts knew that in the immemorial era, dragons didn't have the habit of sleeping for decades or centuries. And as the mana in their bloodline decreased, it became increasingly difficult for them to reproduce. The more powerful a creature was, the more difficult it would be for them to reproduce. As for angels, they weren't the angel species from myths and legends. Instead, they were the angel species from the first generation of order species. As pure creatures of order, they were more sensitive to their environment. In the end, their entire species disappeared from the mortal plane. And if my guess was correct, the angel species would soon return to the mortal plane as the elemental tide increased. However, the creature before me had broken the most basic rule of all. It had broken the most basic rule of how a creature should adapt to its environment. First of all, it was an individual creature. Secondly, judging from its current biological structure, there was no foundational difference between this creature and the Eternal Thunder people. Its feet even had barbs for climbing, and its right arm was covered in wear and tear from wielding a sword for a long period of time. Considering that even the Titan giants didn't have such ridiculous trees for it to climb, one frightening conclusion after another was laid out before us. Perhaps this mountain-like tiger god was just an ordinary Eternal Thunder person in the past. It was just that Eanes forcefully distorted its biological structure and transformed it into such a gigantic creature. Has the cause of its death been determined yet? None of its bones have any obvious external injuries, and its bones show no signs of weakening. Combined with the Eternal Thunder people's legends, it's most likely that it starved to death. I frowned. This sounded rather strange to me, but if I thought about it carefully, I felt that it was quite possible. Its gigantic body meant an even greater consumption of energy. When this tiger god lost its master and subordinates that worshipped it, its original survival skills and hunting techniques were no longer able to support its consumption. The prey it worked so hard to gather wasn't even enough for a single bite, so it naturally starved to death. Transforming an ordinary warrior into a gigantic magical beast? Is that a Titan Giant's power level? We had already witnessed the fourth Titan Giant's beast-taming abilities in Oaktown. An ordinary white lion had transformed into a divine beast with the power level of a semi-god. If a sealed Titan Giant was unsealed, its power level would likely be even more ridiculous. Of course, I didn't believe that it would be easy to create such a warrior. Otherwise, the legends wouldn't be the strongest warrior under the command of the creator giants, but the giant warriors under the command of the Titan gods. Is there enough mana in the mana pool? There's enough. The elemental tide's density here is quite high, and the mana pool is already operating at full capacity. Plus, the mages are replenishing mana, so the recovery rate has already surpassed the consumption rate. There was a limit to how many undead mages could summon undead. With my current level of mana, I would have long since become a dried corpse if I had to summon such a monster under normal circumstances. However, I had already constructed a mage tower here. If I used the mage tower to cast spells, I would be able to use the mage tower's mana reserves to pay for the mana consumption. Of course, most undead mages would choose something like a soul summoning tower, but the mage tower's regular buff and mana replenishment abilities would still be usable. Summoning a bone dragon required a legend-ranked undead lich. Logically speaking, my gold-ranked mana wouldn't even be able to summon a single bone dragon. Even if I added the mage tower's mana reserves, it would still be far from enough. However, I had once reached the peak of my power level and found a solution to this problem. You can't afford it all at once? Then let's do it in installments. My inability to leave right now wasn't an excuse or an excuse. Right now the mage tower, and this corpse were all bound by invisible chains. I was constantly on high alert. My mana and spirit were amplified by the mage tower, and I gathered the mana reserves in the mage tower's mana pool to continuously summon undead from this corpse. Ordinary undead mages would summon undead creatures, find a target, connect their spirits, and pay mana. Either they succeed or they fail. However, I was able to turn this into a continuous state, turning the one-time payment into installments every second. Every second, I was plagued by a headache from overexerting myself. I wanted to fall asleep, but I knew that if I really fell asleep, not only would the summoning fail, I would also suffer from the backlash of the spell's failure. When this forbidden undead summoning spell went out of control, all the mana retroaction would come at me at once, and I might even die on the spot. As expected, overcasting spells will cause one's spirit to become tired and sleepy. This has nothing to do with overcasting spells. Your soul's strength has been repeatedly tempered by the cycle of reincarnation. Now you can basically ignore the cycle of reincarnation. Spirit magic is basically useless against you, so how could this little bit of mana retroaction possibly harm you? An ordinary undead mage's soul would have long since collapsed if they continuously cast spells for such a long period of time. You're still alive and kicking, which means that your spirit is far from being exhausted. From a mage's perspective, the silly cat's conclusion was basically the same as the truth. However, I still felt that it was quite strange. Then why do I feel so uncomfortable all over? My head feels like it's splitting, and I feel so sleepy. Idiot, it's your fault for not sleeping at all. This is a normal physiological reaction. If a normal person doesn't sleep for 4 days, they'll probably die already. You only have a headache and sleepiness, which means that your body is super healthy. Oh, I see. Alright then, it seemed that not sleeping for a long period of time would still affect one's intelligence. Even if I intentionally pretended to be stupid, it seemed that I had indeed accidentally made a stupid mistake this time. It'll probably take a few more days. Based on the speed at which you're excavating and casting the spell, it'll probably take another 3 days. Persevere. Didn't you notice that your mana is increasing? Do your best. Overusing one's mana was a double drain on one's physical body and soul. However, if one was able to survive, it would actually increase one's total mana. However, it was far too dangerous. Nobody would be willing to risk their lives just for this tiny bit of improvement. So, you're saying that I'm constantly overusing my mana? At the same time, I'm constantly casting spells. This was doubtlessly a test as well as an opportunity. The mage tower had cost a tremendous amount of resources, the soul and experience of someone who had experienced the cycle of reincarnation, and the support of a large number of mages. If any of these factors were missing, this experiment would have failed. However, it would be far too much of a pity to give up now. As long as you can complete this spell, at the very least, your total mana will increase by 1 rank. Legend rank mana? Alright, I'll endure it, but I'm a little bored. Harloise, can you sing a little tune to relieve your boredom? Meow meow meow, the cat's march. Is it nice? Harlow's eyes were already squinting into slits as she waved her paws and purposefully meowed softly. The silly cat was trying to act cute, but Roland was recording it in his memory crystal. Heh, I'm going to show it to my old friends later. I'm going to show everyone that the Queen of Banshees has forgotten her past after being a cat for so long. How much will you pay in exchange for this crystal? Ah, why are you biting me again? Roland, you bastard. Chapter 405. H's New Year's First News Summary? So it wasn't written by the fairies? It's a new journal jointly created by San Antonio, the Mage Country, and several other major countries. Just the number of copies sold in each country is astonishing. Whoever controls public opinion will have the right to speak. Nobody's an idiot these days. This morning, a blue dragon suddenly flew over the campsite. Apart from the invitation letter, this journal was also included in the gift package. Although it wasn't color-printed, the paper was excellent, the wording was exquisite, and the content was well illustrated. Let me see what important news it is that requires a swift dragon to deliver it to me. The moment I flipped to the first page, I immediately closed it. Ultraman fights small monsters? Isn't there something wrong with the style? The headlines already seemed ridiculous, but the silly cat scurried out from a corner. Let me see, what Ultraman? It's obviously the cloud giants that vanished from the world have returned to the mortal world. On the battlefield between Bardi and the Holy Church, they viciously taught the dragons a lesson. Halent's army was forced to retreat after a bitter battle. Cloud giants? There are actually cloud giants in the mortal plane. Needless to say, the giant that was glowing all over really looked like the legendary Ultraman, the Giant of Light. The dragons that were being beaten by the giant on the ground really looked like little monsters that were shouting shameful lines as they appeared on the stage. Cloud giants were one of the strongest subspecies of giant. They were known as the Titan's favorites. Cloud giants were the tallest of all giants and had the most extravagant appearances. It was said that all of them were handsome men and beautiful women who wore extravagant clothing. Cloud giants were also born with natural talent for controlling clouds and mist. They were also skilled at learning divine arts. However, most people were known for their outstanding talent in art and music. Many majestic palaces were built by cloud giants. Bards sang about cloud giants' masterpieces and treated them as their teachers. Of course, since cloud giants were also the most intelligent of all giants, cloud giants could produce mages, priests, and other combat job classes. Cloud giants were also one of the few giants that were skilled at organizing and fighting in teams. Perhaps cloud giants couldn't compare to the lava giants, who were skilled in martial arts, but cloud giants' battle teams were definitely the scariest of all giants. It had been a long time since anyone had seen the cloud giants in the mortal plane. It was rumored that the cloud giants had already left the mortal plane in order to escape from the curse of stupidity. But it would seem that the cloud giants, who were rumored to love peace and art, still made their choice under the summons of the Titan giants. If it was the cloud giants, Halent's defeat would be understandable. Not only that, we'll still be able to understand and remotely control the outside world while we're sealed. We'll have to increase our vigilance and evaluation of the Titans even more. What caught his attention the most was the sentence that was underlined in red at the back of the message. P.S. Legend has it that angels appeared in this battle. However, according to our investigations, they were only mercenaries from the Winged Tribe who voluntarily participated in this battle. The despicable Holy Church used these Winged Tribe members as angels in order to shake the Bardi warriors' resolve. An angel appeared? I asked directly, and Cade nodded. Yes, but didn't the higher-ups say that it's the Winged Tribe? Considering the political standpoint of this magazine, yep, since it was jointly published by the royalty and the government, it was only natural that it wouldn't go along with the Holy Church's wishes. If it said that the Winged Tribe was the Winged Tribe, I would actually feel that it was more likely that it was the angels. After all, the difference between the winged tribe and the angels was like the difference between a hen and a phoenix. The former were only humans who could fly, while the latter had an ancient bloodline comparable to dragons. It would be far too obvious if they fought on the battlefield. Considering how the angels had a high status in the hearts of ordinary humans in Aichi, they were extremely positive characters in all sorts of myths and legends, and also acted as god envoys for the gods. If the Holy Church truly had angels appear on their side, it would naturally be a severe blow to the newly risen Church of pure holy light. And if angels appeared on the enemy's side, it would also cause ordinary warriors to waver. Not to mention, angel warriors were generally quite strong in combat. In that case, if the Holy Church's expeditionary army had the help of angels and cloud giants, Halent's defeat would be completely understandable. The enemies are the pure angels and the art-loving cloud giants? We have a bunch of undead and evil dragons on our side, as well as dark elves, evil underground creatures, and goblins who value money as much as their lives. Why do I feel like we're the antagonists? You just realized? The enemy faction has cloud giants and angels. I'm afraid that our morale will be affected. It doesn't matter. Race is definitely not a righteous reason, nor is it a reason to slaughter. Why should we be troubled by the opinions of those idiots? I wasn't worried about our morale. Rather, the fact that a large portion of the angels had already become the Order True God's subordinate. Since they were participating in a mortal battle, it was highly likely that some god had decided to interfere. And based on my understanding of the Holy Church's fanatics, when they feel that they've received the god's favor and feel that their actions represent the god's will, even the most vile actions will become holy, and even the most evil intentions will be viewed as the god's benevolence. Rather than believing in the logic of fanatics, it's better to believe that evil villains whose hands are stained with blood will voluntarily repent. Speak like a human. A great massacre and purge. Then, they'll confidently prepare to fight all the way to the Bardi capital. They'll furiously increase their troops and force other countries to join the Holy Light Army. They'll escalate this small-scale battle into an Armageddon. I believe that they're capable of doing such a thing. That's far too direct. But I have to say, the more I think about it, the more likely it seems. This is completely the Holy Church that we know. If the Holy Church appears victorious and uses the name of the Holy Light to summon other major countries that believe in the Holy Light to participate in this battle, it'll likely escalate into a world war. There were some things that Harlois didn't say out loud, but we all understood. Bardi was a mega-empire, after all. Bardi had accumulated an astonishing amount of resources and wealth. It was obvious that Bardi was on the losing end of the war against Bardi. Those greedy predators now had a righteous excuse to attack Bardi. How could they possibly miss out on such a good opportunity? I put down this journal and fell into a state of confusion. At the same time as the game's history, the entire world had entered the Vulture of War expansion pack. The elves and beastmen were at war, and all the major countries were fighting each other for the sake of ambition. I originally thought that I had avoided the worst possible outcome, but I never expected that the game's history would be so unpredictable. I actually mysteriously returned to square one. No, the situation has already changed. The Bardi Empire in the game's history is destined to be destroyed. No matter how things develop, the ending won't be any worse than this. Besides, it's only a local war right now. It might not come to that. I just need to hurry up. I opened up this journal again, intending to take a look at what else had happened recently. Clap. However, I only took a single glance before I dropped the journal on the ground. The second page of the Bardi Empire's battlefield contained even more infuriating news. San Antonio has declared war on the Foss Empire, Siwan Dukedom, and other countries. Both sides' night squadrons have already exchanged fire on the Siwan Dukedom's Yao Bear Plains. San Antonio has achieved a great victory. I had an icy expression as I flipped to the next page. This only made me more and more annoyed. The Swallow Federation demands that the Kasola Kingdom hand over the seal of the sea god that they stole. Marshal Ben emphasizes that if the Kasola Kingdom continues to remain silent, the Swallow Federation will consider waging war to take back their national treasure. New sea tribes and sea monsters have appeared on the Ottoman Empire's borders. Lady Storm's priests and priestesses have appeared on the battlefield. Organized sea giants have also joined the battle. The war between the Ottoman Empire and the Sea Tribe has escalated. The Heen Kingdom of the Elves has announced that it will become the San Heen Empire. Moon Elf Queen Afina has declared herself the new Elven Empress. She also demands that all other Elven kingdoms submit to her. 16 kingdoms of the Elves have declared their allegiance, and 23 kingdoms have declared war on the Elven Empire. The Elven Civil War has begun. Silly cat, don't tear. What's there to see if you tear? Boiling black mana began to boil on the silly cat's body. A screaming banshee shadow formed on the black cat's body. This was the first time I had ever seen Harloise so angry. It was evident that she was truly angry. I wisely ignored Harloise, who was currently bristling with anger. From a certain standpoint, the re-establishment of the Gold Elf Empire would perhaps have new historical significance for ordinary elves. However, for a Gold Elf descendant like Harloise, this would be nothing more than a traitor wearing the crown that originally belonged to her. This was a deep-seated hatred that she would never forgive. As I continued reading, there were many similar news articles. Some of them didn't seem very interesting, but if I really thought about them, they would be quite troublesome. Traces of gigantic insectoids have been discovered in the North Sea. These insectoids have taken over the nearby underground ruins. These insectoids have incredibly high combat strength and are naturally resistant to magic. They are suspected to be an immemorial species. A large number of ogres have appeared in the San Anton Empire's Ocephalon region. There are many subspecies of ogres in the snowy plains, mountain cliffs, and forests. The San Anton Empire's government is warning all nearby residents to be on high alert. They'll be organizing a crusade against the ogres soon. So many troublesome things happened at the same time. This seemed like a coincidence, but it was actually a type of necessity. Now that the Holy War had begun, the ambitions that had been suppressed for thousands of years were finally unrestrained. Now that winter had passed, and the spring of the new year was the time for the long-prepared plans to begin. The ambitious individuals who had been prepared for this for a long time finally extended their tentacles, and the world of Aichi was now filled with many things. I closed this magazine and glanced at the silly cat who was still fuming with anger for no reason. Her ethereal projection kept screaming while her physical body was glaring at the magazine. I shook my head. Some things seemed like I had let go of them, but they had actually always been in my heart. They were weaknesses that no one wanted to touch. If anyone dared to touch the land in the Northlands, I would probably end up just like her. I would act like an injured beast, hide in a corner, and roar at everyone. As for Harloise, perhaps the scars in her heart that she didn't want to be opened up the most was the elven crown that had originally belonged to the Gold Elves. How many generations of inheritance and how many former Gold Elves' glory had finally fallen from her hands? The pain of losing her country? The pain of being betrayed by someone she trusted? The feeling of helplessness as she watched everything head towards Armageddon? Perhaps it was because we were both in the same boat and recalled the Mist Kingdom back in the day. Or perhaps it was because I simply didn't want to see anyone bully my pet, but I felt rather sad and displeased as I looked at this silent ethereal projection. That was why I made this promise. Relax. As long as I'm here, no matter who it is, they'll never be able to easily wear this crown that belongs to the Gold Elves. Chapter 406. I had traveled to many places in the past, and I also loved the scenery of traveling. In fact, I had even gained many things and comprehended many things on my travels. Perhaps this was the origin of my sole imprint, the Ice Traveler. The icy tundra was pure white, and the towering snow-capped mountains were so high that even breathing was a luxury. That was a forbidden zone for both life and color. In that despairing place where there was nothing at all, I learned to abandon myself. That's right, this wasn't something grand like emptying one's soul. It was a self-exile that represented abandonment and expulsion. In that land of snow where it was impossible to tell the difference between the sky and the earth, I was abandoned there. I interrogated my own soul in that despairing and deathly dream. Why is this world so difficult? Why can't we just want to live well? Why is it so difficult to live? Why is it that brave warriors who gave up everything and sacrificed themselves still lost their homes and loved ones, and even had their names tarnished after death? Are there really no fairy tales in reality? Are good people supposed to go to hell? Is this all my fault? Is this my sin? If I was wrong, wouldn't it have been enough to just punish me? Why did so many good people have to accompany me to hell? My memories of the past kept replaying themselves. Those faces that made me feel guilty, regretful, and yearning for them would never let me go. Those malicious insults would never leave my ears. It's all your fault. If it wasn't for you, a self-righteous transmigrator, how could our country have perished? The twin stars of misfortune? No, 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 the only misfortune is you, the outsider who took over the prince's body. It's all because of you, the jinx, that our citizens were slaughtered and driven to despair. It's all your fault. Why are you the only one who survived? Why don't you go to hell to accompany us? His face, which used to be kind and amiable in the past, was now distorted by hatred. His originally kind greeting caused me to spend dawn after dawn in curses and curses. That's right. Why am I still alive? Heavens, why am I the only one left alive? I want to die. Let me die. I don't know how I got through those dreamlike days, because I no longer have any memory or the concept of time. Looking back, even my memories are just fragments. The only thing I can remember clearly is the snow white and coldness. Perhaps I didn't make it through and had already sunk into complete insanity at that moment. It was only my final bit of luck and coincidence that brought me back from the endless insanity. Perhaps during that period of time I was half crazy and half lucid. When I was crazy, I was cursing the heavens for being unfair, and when I was lucid, I was cursing my own powerlessness and weakness. Reality and dreams were twisted together, and my idealistic thinking and twisted madness were actually able to fuse together. Perhaps this was the most logical explanation for my fragmented memories, but in the end I made it through. My rationality, which I had regained from my despair, told me that even in death, those who had trusted me still stood firmly under my flag. How could they possibly regret their choice and trust in me? A knight's heart is like a fortress of steel. It's pure and doesn't tolerate any impurities. I actually suspected that they would regret following me. That's the greatest insult to them. I'm such an unqualified ruler. Even now, I'm still doubting their loyalty and trust. Even though I recovered my rationality, I still chose to live alone in a glacier. I faced my true self and heart in a peaceful life. I interrogated my own soul and memories bit by bit, and took stock of my past mistakes in the dark night of a stove. If only I had been a bit more mature in my thinking, a bit more sly, a bit more shameless, a bit more cruel, perhaps I wouldn't have failed. I had always liked lively scenes, but I gradually fell in love with the color that represented ice in the snow-white world. That was because I knew that in the face of despair, impassioned emotions would be just as meaningless as grand slogans. Calm and sensitive thoughts were the only path to salvation. I desired to freeze my rationality beneath the glacier. If possible, I wished to leave my anger beneath the snow mountain. That way, I wouldn't lose control of my emotions because of anger. Nor would I do something that I regretted in the past. Insanity and anger are meaningless. The impulsiveness of a hot-blooded youth will only bring endless pain. I despise anger, I curse insanity, and I desire to become a bystander in a desperate situation. I didn't know when, but I no longer felt anger. Instead, 2 soul shards that represented anger appeared on my neck. From then on, I became a traveler who traveled alone on an icy mountain. I engraved that scene into my soul and entered the realm of legends again, laying down the foundation for me to reach the peak. Perhaps I really did it. I became a bystander who could appreciate the brilliance of Armageddon's arrival and make the calmest decision in a desperate situation. Perhaps I was simply a cripple who had cut off my own soul shard. I was a lunatic who thought that I had calmed down. But no matter what, I didn't regret it. After all, that was my past. It was my own choice. It was a sin that I should bear for eternity. I will never regret. The intense light hurt my eyes. Tears actually flowed out of my eyes. My pillow was covered in tears. Is it this dream again? When I looked carefully, I saw that the sun and the moon were hanging in the sky. Looking at the position between the 2 stars, it seemed that it was already dawn. Do you often have this dream? The golden-haired young elf girl was sitting on my pillow. Her silky blonde hair was all over the bed, and there were still traces of her pillow on her white and tender thighs. Her usual mocking and arrogant tone of voice now contained a rare hint of concern and nervousness. Her bright red cheeks were tinged with shyness and a blush. I shook my head and tossed these boring emotions aside. I tossed the liquid that represented weakness to the corner of the room. I shook my head and opened my eyes. The next moment, the energetic, young, and energetic Roland had returned. No, it's all things that I've already forgotten. I don't know why, but I've been dreaming about it this week. By the way, who are you? How did you get in here? Is this some prank that wants to ruin my reputation? I told you, I'm not a lolicon. I'm a great maid lover. All right then. The little girl's expression of concern instantly transformed into one of anger. She then smacked her lips and suddenly transformed into a bird that was about to bite me. Don't bite me! Ah, this feeling? You're Harloise? Aren't you a cat? Reality proved that it was easy for people to have low blood pressure when they first woke up. It was only natural for their memories to be unclear, but recognizing the wrong person or calling the wrong name at a critical moment would be fatal. Oh, I remember now. I'm sorry. Harloise, I was in a daze just now. Don't bite me. I'm bleeding. I'm bleeding. I'm really bleeding. I finally managed to take off the fake loli on my head. I made a bunch of promises before I managed to coax Harloise to apply some medicine on my head. You're having a flashback dream. This is your soul urging you to create a soul imprint. When I asked her about the dream, Harloise gave her a firm and resolute judgment. I think that's a memory from when I created the Ice Traveler's soul imprint. What a pity. My death in that life must have been quite a grand one, and I lost the most memories. Would I have such a dream while creating a soul imprint? I don't think I had such a memory before. Of course. In the past, you were creating a new soul imprint, and you were gathering all of your life experiences. Now, you're restoring your past soul imprint. You need to face your past self, even if it's an incredibly sad past. My past self? What a sad past. No wonder I forgot about it. Wait a moment, how do you know that it's a past memory, and that it's a sad past? You actually dared to peek? Did you use magic to peek at my dream? You should know that cats are incredibly curious creatures. The next instant, the blonde loli transformed into a silly cat. She even scratched her face with her claws and acted cute. Harloise was getting better and better at fooling people. However, I forced out a sentence through gritted teeth. A cat's curiosity? Yep, perhaps we should first talk about how cats died. It hadn't even been a month since they entered this world, but many of the warriors here had already made breakthroughs. Most of them had been stuck at a bottleneck for a long time, and naturally broke through after spending some time in this high elemental tide environment. However, these breakthroughs shouldn't be underestimated. In the human world, most mortals would work hard their entire lives, and even with the help of a great teacher and resources, they would only be able to reach the peak of silver. Otherwise, gold masters wouldn't be so popular. And if all the peak silver masters who were treated as mortals easily broke through to gold, their decades of accumulation would transform into actual power, and their combat strength would increase by at least 3 times. Advancing from gold to legend rank was even more of a summation and accumulation of one's life. There was still a path to gold, but legend rank was a path where you worked hard your entire life, and you were just a tiny bit away from reaching it. If you couldn't comprehend it, then you couldn't. However, some people did indeed comprehend it, but due to old age or injuries, they were physically and mentally exhausted, and were still unable to break through to legend rank. This wasn't an isolated case. Life was short and young people were full of energy. Young people didn't know about worries. It was only when people were old and about to die, or when they suffered a major setback, that they would sincerely reflect on their past, and only then would they comprehend how to break through to legend rank. But by then, it would already be too late. Their physical bodies, which were nearing the end of their lives, wouldn't be able to withstand the torment. Meanwhile, these veteran mercenaries and warriors had mysteriously recovered from their injuries and extended their lifespans in this high elemental tide environment, allowing them to surpass this hurdle. Just being stationed here gave these young warriors tremendous benefits, and allowed the veteran warriors to regain their combat strength. Naturally, they also gained more confidence in our cause. Of course, in a few decades, perhaps the entire world would have such benefit. However, at that time, the tide would rise, and our enemies would be even more difficult to deal with. But actually, I was the one who benefited the most from all this joy. That 7-day soul-summoning session had ended, and the tremendous consumption caused me to immediately fall asleep. However, I also forcefully raised my magic power to legend rank. Soul imprints, which would normally be a problem for most people for their entire lives, weren't a problem from the very start. I was forced to swiftly create my own soul imprint, forcing me to face myself. How difficult! Although entering legend or even saint rank is a necessary condition to complete my grand plan, I really don't want to have that dream again. In that case, you can try creating other soul imprints first. But they won't be any better. Thinking about what other soul imprints represented and their memories, my expression instantly became strange. I then viciously glared at the silly cat who didn't know what was good for her. "You bastard, did you peek at my dream again? Otherwise, how would you know that they're all pitiful? Is there even a need to look at them? Isn't your life nothing more than tableware? It's already filled with tragedies. No matter how you look at them, there's no comedy to be seen." Comedy? There's such a thing? The Silly Cat's Comedy of Seeking Death, Schrodinger's Cat. Excellent reviews. Guess if this cat is dead or alive. Chapter 407. Even if I didn't receive any news from the outside world, I knew what would happen. The world would never revolve around a single person's wishes. There were plenty of examples of people being crushed by the wheel of history. If someone was truly capable of predicting the future's development, it would be much more practical to make some preparations beforehand and earn some money. If someone wanted to become a major country because of this, then the butterfly effect they created would be enough to kill them. Those who obey the heavens shall prosper, and those who defy the heavens shall perish. Defying the heavens and changing fate? If you want to use your individual strength to change the entire world, you'll need to be mentally prepared to die several hundred times over. Even I had never thought of forcefully defying the heavens and changing fate. All I wanted was to slowly accumulate power and make some changes in the corner, attempting to become the 4 tails that could change the entire world. Directly wipe out all the enemies? I've never thought of that before, but I can start by weakening the enemy forces, increasing our combat strength, and delaying the enemy armies from reaching the mortal plane. I don't need to single-handedly defeat the innumerable demons and monsters, but I can increase the number and quality of the heroes. Accumulating small victories will lead to a major victory, which will ultimately turn the situation around. The truth was that my strategy was already somewhat effective. The justice points system and the currently developing magical engineering had doubtlessly increased the average combat strength and potential of the entire mortal plane. Once technology reached a certain level, it would be possible to upgrade it twice every 10 years. These advantages of being in the lead would only become greater and greater as time passed. The changes in the underground and the Northlands gave us new hope. These were all important changes that hadn't been seen in the game's history. The Holy Church, which had originally been the leader of the Holy Church, had been shaken to its foundations. This might seem like a personal grudge, and fine, I did admit that I had a personal grudge, but if you looked at the game's history, you would see that what was scarier than godlike enemies and pig-like teammates were idiotic superiors who thought they were gods. I think that we have a great advantage. Let's go over. Hold your ground and hold your ground. As long as you can last until next week, your victory will be a celebration for Pope Barty's birthday. Reinforcements? Reinforcements might arrive next month. No, they're not here to collect corpses, nor are they here to steal credit. But one of them is the son of a cardinal, you know what I mean. Damn it, you actually dared to hang up on me? Be careful that I don't judge you as a heretic. Alliance? With those heretics? And those dark-skinned aliens? May the holy light descend upon their heads and burn these villains to death. We need more holy wars. Perhaps the greatest taboo on the battlefield was having amateurs command experts in a strange battle. Yet, during that period of history, the Holy Church, at its peak, forcibly became the core of the Order-allied armies with the help of many true God incarnations, God envoys, and angels. They sent bishops to every country to supervise the war. But the result was that these newly appointed warlords claimed that they were here to comfort the warriors and deliver God's grace, but they actually played a significant role in the early stages of the war. Yep, they played a positive role for the enemy. As for why the Holy Light was only effective in the early stages, apart from the fact that the various countries began to make the Grand Warlords a figurehead, it was more because as the wars progressed, the accumulated failures and disasters caused more and more people to believe in the Holy Light. However, this also caused the reputation of the Holy Church, the executor of the Holy Light, to drop to the ground. The reason? Warriors who were forced to the brink would be willing to do everything in their power to take down any bastard that tried to blindly command them. The cruel war would naturally cause these old officials to be eliminated. And even if the Southern sect didn't do anything, new sects would still appear in the game's history. The Holy Knight and Holy Light priests would distance themselves from the high and mighty bishops. The strongest Holy Knight of the Miracle Hand would lead a team to leave the Holy Church. This was something that the game's history required, as well as the development of the situation at that time. It was impossible to stop. Of course, the losses they caused would be impossible to make up for. And now, the future would be much better than in the game's history. With the Holy Church's current reputation, not only would they not send out bishops as warlords, they would have to first deal with the Southern sect before deciding what to do. Besides, with the incident at Oaktown where the Southern sect falsely claimed military achievements, the Holy Church had a reason to refuse the Southern sect's offer. It was obviously impossible to imagine the Southern sect as the Holy Church in the game's history. Just from these two aspects alone, history had already changed. However, the world's development would never go as one wished. While there were advantages, there would naturally be disadvantages as well. For example, the Barty Empire. In the game's history, the Titan giants and undead emperors had fought to the point of mutual destruction. In the end, the Titan giants became the undead emperors. This was a miracle that would be impossible to replicate. Although the Barty Empire still existed, the Titan giants and undead emperors were all real threat. Since the Titan giants and undead emperors were called miracles, it meant that this was an example that couldn't be replicated. It was highly likely that the Titan giants and undead emperors would become major problems in the future. And now, although the overall situation was better than in the game's history, what should have happened had still happened. Now that the world was in chaos, it would be unrealistic to try to stop the wars one by one. Even if it was forcefully done, it would be a waste of manpower and resources with nothing to show for it. After all, this was just like a boat with countless holes in it. Even if you tried to fix the holes one by one, new holes would constantly appear. By the time all the holes were fixed, the boat would have already sunk. That was why, at this time, any small skirmishes in the corner would be meaningless. Since it was already time for blood to be shed, I was prepared to use any means necessary to obtain victory. To use a rather inappropriate phrase, "Come at me directly if you dare." It seemed that there was a grammatical error in the translation. The original phrase should have been, "Come at me directly if you dare." It was all the fault of the naughty subtitles team. Are you ready? I patted the dust off my cape. This new set of clothes that had just been delivered to me by express delivery wouldn't have been cheap. The brilliant blue crown had the emblem of moonlight on it. Starlight gathered on it, and the god equipment's crown was like a shining crescent on my forehead. I was still unable to fully control the god equipment's power. My slightly closed eyes were filled with divine light. This was the moon god's purest power. Patricia's protection. High-level god equipment crown. This is the moon goddess's most beloved crown. It is an extravagant crown created from the essence of moonlight. It is forever surrounded by starlight, and the wearer will feel as if they are surrounded by the stars. Actually, the wearer will indeed be blessed by the stars. This crown is also known as the most beautiful crown in the world. In ancient times, it caused multiple god wars between the moon goddess and the goddess of beauty. Ability 1, Seal. Ability 2, Seal. Function 7, Dazzling Starlight Summon. Summon countless stars to descend and deal a devastating blow to the surroundings with you as the core. Number of uses, 1 per month. System notification. Princess Peach, if you wear this crown that even the goddess of beauty would be jealous of, you will be the most beautiful flower at the ball. But considering the fact that the moment you activate this god equipment's only unsealed ability, everyone will accompany you to watch a meteor shower. The entire Dragon City will ascend together with you, so you will also be the most dangerous flower at the ball. Another system notification. Considering that the goddess of laughter, the goddess of beauty, and a dozen other goddesses have yet to give up on this crown, if you don't want to die to goddess descending from the heavens, object descending from the heavens, or my goddess descending from the heavens, please return this crown to Patricia as soon as possible. That's right, this was a god equipment, a high-level god equipment from Patricia. Although it was 99% sealed, the only ability that wasn't sealed was the most dangerous part of this god equipment. As long as I activated this god equipment, it would be just as if Patricia herself was using it. I didn't know the specific power of this god equipment, but judging from the system's explanation, it would be far more powerful than a forbidden spell. And right now I didn't only have one god equipment on me. I was now a full set of god equipment. The black-handed staff in my right hand had the emblem of a snake and dragon entwined on it. There were no magical wavelengths around it at all, and it faintly made others unable to detect its existence. However, I could say that this was the second most dangerous god equipment on me. Unfathomable Fate. High-level god equipment. Staff. Paired with this staff is a pair of presbyopic glasses. The sly and cunning god of fate often wears a cape, a staff, and a pair of presbyopic glasses. He pretends to be a fortune-teller, a sage, or something similar. He hides in a dark corner and acts as some sort of guide to fate. If you listen to his guidance, everything will be fine, but if you don't, do you want to taste the feeling of eating noodles, burping, falling, and having all the bones in your body shatter? Actually, he doesn't even need to do it himself. This staff is more than capable of doing it. Ability 1, Seal. Ability 2, Seal. Ability 3, Fate is watching you. Choose a target and reduce their luck stat. The luck they lose will be added to you. This effect will last for 2 hours. This ability ignores all magic immunity and magic resistance. Even true gods are unable to resist it. Note: this ability can only be used once on a target. After that, the target will be immune to it for the rest of their lives. Ability 4. Fate is watching you. After using this ability, you will become the luckiest person in the entire world for 10 minutes. However, after using this ability for 3 hours, the additional luck you just obtained will become double misfortune. System reminder: do not use this ability unless absolutely necessary. Changing your fate will only bring misfortune. The third effect was quite easy to understand, but the fourth effect was quite confusing. Plus, my system gave me a rare serious explanation. In order to make sure that I didn't make a mistake when I needed to use this ability, I found a test subject and had him use it once, and then I understood everything. The test subject was a mercenary who loved gambling as much as his life. The moment he used this ability, I told him about its effects, and he impatiently ran off to gamble. In less than 5 minutes, he used only 2 copper coins to gamble and won the gold coins of a mansion. And then, 1 hour later, he accidentally stepped on a banana peel and shattered a noble colleague's family heirloom. While I was sighing at how ancient this mechanism was, I was even more astonished to find out that the family heirloom's value was exactly the same as 2 mansions. Actually, using this god equipment would definitely be a loss for you, but as long as you used it properly, it would be an excellent tool to turn the tables. My female companion didn't embarrass you, did she? Actually, I think it's better if you stand further away. You're too tall. Do you want me to wear high heels? High shoes. In front of me was a tall and beautiful elf who was also wearing an extravagant dress. She was so tall that I had to raise my head to look at her. Her naturally proportioned body didn't look fat at all, and her elegant golden dress perfectly complemented her snow-white skin. Her overly extravagant dress seemed elegant and beautiful on her. Her soft back accentuated her beautiful curves, and her silky blonde hair reached all the way to the back of her ears. That golden glow that seemed like the sun was unique to the gold elves. Harloise lifted her dress and gave me a courteous bow. Today, she would be my female companion. We would be attending a banquet that Dragon City had prepared for us. Where did you find this dress? I thought that it was too small, but it's actually able to adjust itself. That's the god equipment's automatic adjustment function. Don't break it. No, don't dirty it. Otherwise, Bayana will definitely give us an astronomical bill. That's right, this golden dress was also a god equipment. I had only asked her for a god equipment that represented her status, but she maliciously gave me her own dress and even demanded that I use it no matter what. However, I wasn't an idiot, and I unhesitatingly brought Harloise along as my female companion. Although this dress was extravagant and sexy to the point where it revealed all the parts that shouldn't be revealed, it was indeed an excellent god equipment. Bayana's wealth barrier. Armor. God equipment. This is a piece of armor created from gold. Yes, it's a piece of armor, not an extravagant dress. Bayana has never been a foolish and extravagant god. In fact, she's quite practical and thrifty. She used the symbol of wealth to create this armor that can change endlessly. As for why she's using the form of a dress in front of you, should I tell you that Princess Peach's drama is selling like hotcakes in the heavens? Your Highness, you're so embarrassing. Wealth connects the gods. This is a piece of armor created from the concept of wealth. The more money you have, the more additional defensive power this armor will provide. And if you're attacked, your wealth will decrease. A system notification. In Bayana's hands, even a main god would be unable to break through this armor's defense. In your hands, it's nothing more than a sexy dress, but it's definitely perfect. I recommend that you try it. System Notification 1. Harlow's defensive power has already surpassed that of an entire country's ruler. So, you understand. Squeeze out all of her money. A pet's pocket money is also its master's. Friendly reminder 2. If you put on the moonlight crown and a skirt, a certain narrow-minded goddess might be satisfied and calm down. Due to the efforts of a certain goddess who was good at holding grudges, the other gods didn't send me any god equipment or clothing. However, a certain god helplessly sent me the robe that I was most familiar with. It was a silver judge's robe. God equipment, dignity of justice bound. Mage robe. Special Effect 1. Self-judgment of a sinner, sealed. Special Effect 2. Iron Mask of the Judge, sealed. Special Effect 3. Soul Equipment, sealed. Special Effect 4. Equipment, sealed. Special Effect 5. Womian's Will. The user can summon Womian's divine power and use up to 3 true god divine arts per day. System Notification. Can you not be so obvious when you cheat? It was a tradition for mages to wear mage robes as formal attire. The silver Womian's robe was dignified and extravagant. It contained Womian's divine might, so it would never be lacking in manners in any situation. Coupled with the moonlight crown and scepter, it seemed even more mysterious and dignified. Even the young archmage I saw in the mirror felt rather smug. Harlow's smiled brightly as she coiled up her hair and placed her arm on her hand. At this moment, I didn't have the time to kiss her hand, because I was currently biting an extremely showy white rose in my mouth. This wasn't because I suddenly wanted to cosplay as a Pisces. It was because this was the most dangerous god equipment that I had ever borrowed. That's right, Fate's scepter was far more dangerous than the moonlight crown. However, this seemingly ordinary rose was capable of making any god stop in their tracks. Ael's White Rose. Mystical item, top-level god equipment. When the highest god of death, Ael, smiles at a certain god, that god will probably pee his pants in fright. And if Ael flashes a white rose at a certain god, I personally recommend that the god quickly end his or her life. Effect. Causes the chosen target to instantly die. The system notification. Yep, it's that simple. There are no other effects. But trust me, even a main god wouldn't be willing to be chosen by this rose. As for why I foolishly kept the rose's stem in my mouth, it was because Ael said that this would allow the god equipment to get used to my aura. That way, it wouldn't kill me when I attacked. However, I kept feeling like something was wrong. A certain shady organization. He actually didn't wear my dress. I spent so much effort designing it. He really kept the rose in his mouth. He really believed me. Hurry up and record it in my memory crystal. A mysterious evil intent caused me to shiver. However, it was already time for me to head out. Of course, I wouldn't dress up in such a flashy manner for no reason. Compared to the effects of these god equipment, the most important thing was the fact that a true god of the Ael faction had lent me these god equipment of origin. This represented the bottomless support of the entire Ael faction for me. And in the upcoming battles against the dragons and titans, these god equipment would become my powerful trump cards. From now on, we would no longer be mercenaries that they could casually hire. Instead, we would be partners of equal status. And in order to prove my trump cards, I could only choose to appear in such a high-profile manner. Is it too much? Compared to the grand plan I'm about to carry out, this appearance probably isn't enough. Chapter 408. Who's Roland? Some kind of new delicacy? I've never heard of him. I think he's a descendant of the Mist Kingdom? Right, do you know about the Mist Kingdom? It was destroyed more than 300 years ago. He was the prince at the time. In that case, I do have some recollection of him. Has the Mist King's inheritance been lost? That really makes me sigh. Back in the day, I had a good relationship with him. The Northlands were even better at fighting than the barbarians. What a pity. Ha, no matter what happened back then, he was just a mortal. What's there to pity about? That's true. Did you hear? San Lang said that the eternal thunder people are especially delicious when paired with a special type of pickled vegetable. Would you like to try it together? When Dragon City officially held a welcoming banquet and invited a mortal to attend, such conversations were common throughout Dragon City. This was inevitable. After all, for the prideful dragons, when was the last time they treated a mortal with formal courtesy? And for the immemorial dragons, it was normal for them to sleep for 100 years. An existence that was only slightly more than 300 years ago was no different from a young brat who had just made a name for himself. Right now, the immemorial gold dragon Horus was having a headache. As the highest-ranked elder in Dragon City, he decided to invite the Mage Country's special envoy with the highest level of courtesy. The other elders began to complain, saying things like, "How embarrassing! He's just a human, why invite him? If he wants to come, then come. If he doesn't, then scram. Enough. You'll understand once you see him." Also, before he could finish speaking, Horus discovered to his astonishment that not only was his voice unable to transmit, everything before him had stopped moving. His consciousness was still present, but his body was unable to move a single finger. Not only that, even the tiny water droplets and dust in the air had stopped moving. The next instant, everything returned to normal, as if everything that had just happened was nothing more than a nightmare. What happened? Horus stood up while the dragons were astonished at the abnormal scene that had just occurred. They should be here already. It would seem that there are many who are as short-sighted and look down on mortals as you are. I hope that they haven't caused any major trouble. Half an hour ago, when the Borealis slowly entered the Yak Canyon, where Dragon City was located, we were surrounded by countless enthusiastic spectators. Before the dragons attempted to attack us, the blue dragon who was leading the way helped us clear the path. The mountains on both sides were all strangely shaped rock. From the three-dimensional perspective view of the bridge, the huge battleship looked like a small toy, and the giant dragons around it looked like swallows. There are more than 3,700 dragons within range, as well as an equal number of dragon whelps and dragon elders. Many locations are even black on the scouting device. They must have been forcefully covered by the concept of unfathomable. As expected of the three great gathering places for dragons, the radar that was infused with this world's sound magic had excellent performance. The only downside was that its technology and industrial level were still lacking, and it was already larger than 2 rooms. However, it wouldn't be a problem if it was used on a warship. In fact, we've already entered Dragon City's territory. Be prepared. Outside the window, curious dragons kept flying past the battleship's edge. I was worried that the cannon's controllers wouldn't be able to control their hands. In front of the gigantic Borealis battleship, the dragons also became much smaller, and they naturally restrained their arrogance. This also helped me avoid the awkwardness of being surrounded by onlookers. So this is one of the 3 great dragon cities? It's much smaller than I expected, but it looks really valuable. At the end of the mountain range, there was a castle that seemed to be carved out of white jade. It was quite eye-catching, and if I wasn't mistaken, this was indeed the valuable Yalong jade. Although this rare stone jade wasn't a magical metal that could be used to forge equipment, its value was no less than mithril of the same size. It was also quite suitable for the rich to use as a jade bed to show off their wealth. However, to be able to use this to build a house, should I say that as expected of dragons? It's just a historical site. Every year, the guards on duty have to deal with a dozen young dragons who try to steal it. These young dragons are willing to do anything for the sake of the upcoming breeding season or to decorate their dragon nest. Copper Dragon Evelyn naturally accompanied me. After discussing some things, our trust in each other deepened significantly. At the very least, there were many things that I didn't need to intentionally avoid. This wasn't my first time visiting Dragon City, so I had a certain understanding of the unique existence known as Dragon City. Dragon City wasn't a gathering place for dragons. It would be quite rare for even 1% of the Dragon City's residents to reside in Dragon City. Although this sounded inconceivable, it was only natural when considering how large dragons were and how territorial they were. Adult dragons would typically have their own territories. They would have magical beasts and intelligent creatures as servants in their territories. They would live like emperors, so why would they come to a city to be a resident? In the eyes of most dragons, Dragon City was a government organization that was used by powerful individuals to argue with each other. It was also a temporary market that ordinary dragons used to trade their personal items. In order to avoid being recruited by powerful individuals, they would never choose to report to Dragon City unless it was absolutely necessary. The underground Dragon City was similar. However, due to the cruel living environment, the underground Dragon City's Dragon King's authority was much more centralized. Meanwhile, in the surface Dragon City, even the leaders of the underground Dragon City were usually all elders, or there was an incomprehensible system of rotating leaders. However, every social system had its own reason for existing. Actually, such a chaotic and inefficient system was a necessary choice for the dragon's current system. Every single dragon branch had their own personalities. If you had copper dragons represent the blue dragons, that would basically be nonsense. It would already be nice if they didn't start fighting each other. Unlike the underground Dragon City, which only had black dragons and red dragons, there were far too many branches in the surface Dragon City. Every branch hoped that someone would represent their interests, so it was only natural that everyone would have the right to speak. Actually, some powerful branches had multiple elders, while some branches had no elders at all. Everything depended on the dragon's tradition. Their fists did the talking. Since they were far too large, most Dragon City residents would choose to do business in Dragon City in their smaller forms. If they were still unable to transform, they would complete their own transactions outside of Dragon City. As I strolled through Dragon City, I didn't see many adult dragons. Apart from the young dragons that were taken care of by their mothers, the rest were all strange humanoid creatures that had their own draconic might. Elves and humans made up the majority of the population, while beastmen and dwarves were also common. I even saw a few ogres and ogres. However, the strange thing was that the ogres were actually respected by the other dragons. Adult dragons will choose a species' physical appearance as their smaller form. This form's physical appearance and species are unable to be changed. Back when the elves were in power, we often interacted with the elves. Naturally, elven appearances were the most common. This is the era of humans, and most humans are young dragons. As for ogres, the most obvious example would be Little Red and her mother. Little Red's mother was a red-haired elf, while Little Red was a black-haired human. Old dragons from the great demon's generation? No wonder. From a certain standpoint, the physical appearance of Dragon City was a representation of the rise and fall of the various species in the world of Achi. Seeing that more than 50% of the dragons in Dragon City had elven appearances, I could only sigh at how powerful the elven civilization was. However, I also felt a mysterious sense of sorrow. After all, the ancient gold elves who had transformed into gold elves always seemed like they were the real deal. It was hard to say whether or not the gold elves next to me were the real deal. That was why, even though Harloise still had a calm smile on her face, I wasn't surprised at all by the surging emotions I felt through our soul connection. And so, I secretly patted her on the shoulder. And when we observe others, we will naturally become the object of observation. Since we were attending a welcoming party, we didn't bring any attendants with us. Since the dragons here didn't have the habit of using carriages, we naturally chose to walk as well. On the way, my god equipment didn't conceal its elemental fluctuations at all. Not only did it dazzle the dragon's eyes, it also caused quite a few dragons to follow us. Although it was the most basic rule in Dragon City to not have any conflicts, the moment that an outsider left might be the moment that he or she would be robbed. They're all young dragons, right? Heh, youngsters don't know any better. They'll understand after suffering a few times. We completely ignored the dragons following us. It was obvious that the ones following us were all young dragons. Apart from the fact that they were about to enter the breeding season and hoped to obtain more wealth in order to decorate their dragon nest and attract more mates, it was also because the older dragons knew that there were people that they could offend and people that they couldn't. Anyone who dared to leave their god equipment hanging outside wouldn't be afraid of being robbed by others. Not even the myths had ever seen such a powerful existence. Even if such an existence seemed weak, how could they possibly be offended? Suddenly, our vision darkened as a skinny, white-skinned elf transformed into a white dragon right in front of me. Should I say that not all dragons are smart enough? Or should I say that this is as expected of a retarded white dragon? Dragon descendant, hand over the treasures in your possession, and I, Lord Hamist, shall become your new master. Oh my, he actually thinks that I'm a half-dragon? Dragons were used to using dragon descendants and half-dragons as servants and slaves. That was why ordinary dragon descendants didn't have high statuses among dragons. It seemed that my dragon bloodline aura made him believe that I was a half-dragon who was subservient to true dragons. I smiled evilly. Then, I saw that someone seemed to intend to go first, but several evil dragons simultaneously jumped out from behind me. There were blue, green, white, and even bright red dragons. It would seem that there were quite a few red dragons sneaking up on the ground. You little brats, this slave escaped with Lord Hamist's treasures. Do you intend to steal Lord Hamist's treasures? The gigantic white dragon's mouth carried a foul stench as it swept its tail and pushed the group of little dragons away. It seemed that it was actually a rather old ancient white dragon. However, the fact that it was able to survive until now without being killed by anyone was probably due to its luck of staying in the dragon world for such a long time. Hamist seemed to be quite clever as he directly described this as his master hunting down an escaped slave in order to avoid the unwritten rules of Dragon City. By the time the dragon's manager arrived, this matter would probably have already been resolved. Not even the victim would be found, and no one would bother making trouble for an immemorial white dragon for the sake of a few unfamiliar, low-level dragon descendants. Seeing that a dispute had occurred here, and that Hamist, who was rather infamous, was involved, the bystanders all started discussing amongst themselves. However, not a single one of them tried to stop this. Instead, they all seemed to be enjoying a good show with all sorts of ill intentions. Why aren't they fighting yet? Hamist is probably going to be unlucky this time. He was just punished a few days ago. Isn't that really a god equipment? Some dragons were probably hoping to see the white dragon fight to the death, while others were prepared to see the white dragon suffer. Some were even considering the possibility of attacking first. However, no matter how I looked at it, not a single one of them had any kind intentions. I shook my head as I was becoming less and less fond of dragons. Although I had never been fond of these large lizards, no matter which species of dragon they were. Oh my, you really know how to talk. Evelyn, is this how Dragon City treats its guests? Does he not recognize you? Ha, for dragons, their human forms are meaningless. He only recognizes the three-headed magic dragon Evelyn. How could he possibly recognize a young brass dragon like me? In that case, you don't intend to carry out your duties as an elder? My older sister is an elder, but I'm not. Besides, Roland, don't you just happen to need a monkey to make an example out of? Since he's already jumping around, wouldn't it be bad if I beat him to it? I lowered my head and touched my hat. A black light flashed on my staff as I shrugged. It's already boring for you to say it out loud. I still want to enjoy this monkey show a little longer. I looked all around me. The evil dragons seemed to have surrounded us. Their open whispers and malicious intentions made me quite annoyed. How noisy! Law incantation. Silence. The image of a silver-masked man on my mage robe flashed for an instant, and a faint silver light of law exploded forth like a halo. This was the equivalent of Womian's personally casting a law incantation. The entire world was forcefully frozen. An ordinary law incantation. Silence would probably only be able to silence everyone in the court. However, it seemed that the power of my law incantation far surpassed my expectations. The result of my divine power strengthening was that this ordinary, first circle forbidden spell spread throughout the entire dragon city. At that instant the entire world became silent. The malicious words were all gone as the dragons lost the ability to speak. Above Dragon City, the flying dragons lost the ability to spread their wings, causing them to fall down like dumplings. However, the law incantation would probably end before they fell to their death. I smiled evilly as I glanced at the panicking Hamist and young dragons. Law incantation, judgment. However, this time, it was the light of judgment. The surrounding dragons who attempted to kill and rob Dragon City were all dyed red. They were criminals who had been caught red-handed by the law enforcers. It would seem that Dragon City's public security is quite average. I could see that there were several large red zones as well. Womian's divine power had once again caused this low-level law incantation to spread throughout the entire city. No matter how foolish the white dragon was, Hamist knew that he had run into an iron wall this time. However, before he could do anything, I raised my staff. Law incantation. Judgment, Your Highness Roland, wait a moment. It seemed that my law incantation had caused such a commotion that it startled the dragon's elders who were waiting for us. The sight of a group of dragons running over was quite a shocking sight. However, I shook my head and directly finished the law incantation I was casting. Law incantation, Judgment Strike. I lightly touched the white dragon's heel with my black staff. Hamist's gigantic dragon head paused in surprise for a moment before widening his eyes and opening his mouth in disbelief. He looked towards the dragon's elders for help. Bang. Hamist didn't even get a chance to scream before his head exploded like a firework. His blood splattered all over the street. Of course, the dragon's elders' faces were also covered in blood. I smiled in satisfaction as I looked at their ashen faces. Nice to meet you, esteemed elders of the dragons. I am Roland Mist. What a delightful welcoming ceremony. You're truly creative to find someone like this to welcome me. Chapter 409. Killing someone on the streets of Dragon City, and even splattering the dragon's elders' faces with their blood, was that arrogant? Of course it was arrogant. How could I not be arrogant when I killed someone on the streets and even yelled at the police? No matter if the person who was killed deserved it or not, this was indeed a slap in the face to the local authorities. No matter if the elders were elves or beastmen, they all paused in surprise for a moment before their expressions turned ashen, and it seemed like they were about to explode. Prince Roland, could that be Lord Aelus Rose in your hands? As for me, I quietly played with the white rose in my hand. Every time I saw Ael use this rose to show off his popularity, I really wanted to steal it and play a game of she loves me, she doesn't love me with the rose petals. Cough, cough. I seemed to have accidentally exposed something again. This time, I didn't feel like I was trying to act cool and slap him in the face anymore. I finally met someone who knows what's good for me. This time, my friends were worried that I would be bitten by a mad dog, so they lent me some toys. It would seem that they were right. He looked at the splattered brains in disgust, and his attitude of disdain was clear on his face. As expected, there are many mad dogs here. I didn't even try to hide my disdain, as if the dragon corpse before me was some sort of filthy thing. This disdain instantly transformed into flames that destroyed all reason. As I looked at the ashen-faced and red-faced elders, I felt as if I could hear the sound of my reason snapping. How dare you? The fiery-tempered blue dragon directly revealed his true form. However, he was stopped by one of his own. The gold dragon Horus directly stopped him. Don't be impulsive. That white rose is Death God Ael's personal god equipment. Do you want to die? The blue dragon elder paused in surprise for a moment, but then immediately stopped. Of course, he knew who Ael was, and he also knew that he would only be sending himself to his death if he went up. However, since he had already stepped up, wouldn't he lose all face if he gave in? Only now did he have the free time to size up Halos. When he saw that Halos was covered in god equipment, he could only inwardly complain. Then, the tense situation suddenly stopped. A gust of cold wind blew past, and the blue dragon elder's face was filled with embarrassment. He didn't want to charge forward and give up his life, but if he retreated in front of everyone's eyes, he would lose all face. However, in the underworld, reputation was sometimes even more important than life itself. Just as he gritted his teeth and decided to gamble on his chances of survival and whether or not Evelyn would dare to kill him in Dragon City, Evelyn suddenly jumped out at this critical moment to act as a mediator. As expected of the undying Roland on the Calamity rankings, ranked 20th on the Calamity rankings. Right, everyone, this is Her Highness Harloise. She also seems to be on the Calamity rankings. I haven't congratulated the two of you on your recent rise in the rankings. Even I had to agree with Evelyn's words. What a great way to go downstairs. She's no ordinary person. She's a calamity, so it's fine even if you retreat. Evelyn also helped me get out of this embarrassing situation. After all, I only wanted to beat down the Blue Dragon Elder's arrogance. I didn't come all the way here just to make him my enemy. Killing a bandit who came to rob me and killing the bandit's leader on the spot were two completely different concepts. Evelyn's identity was quite special as well. The Dragons' elders all knew who she was. Since she was one of them, it was quite acceptable for her to speak up for her. Then, a certain blue dragon elder returned to his human form with a stern expression. He then stomped his feet and disappeared without a trace. He didn't have the face to stay here any longer. Even so, he wouldn't be able to regain his face today. It was likely that we had become enemies. Welcome, welcome. My two esteemed guests, our welcoming banquet has long since been prepared. If there's anything else, we can discuss it after the banquet. At this point, what else could I say? I could only think of a way to ease the atmosphere. Although I still had a cold expression of disdain as the dragons glared at me the entire way to the banquet, I was actually quite warmed up inside. From a certain standpoint, this was what I had been looking forward to the most. Otherwise, it would have been impossible for us to negotiate. From the very start, the dragons didn't take us seriously at all. Our request for reinforcements from the mage country was like trying to find a cure on Baidu. Our mages can't do it, and human mages probably can't do it either. But there's no harm in trying. In the Titan Giant's eyes, their only enemies and opponents were the Titans and Giant. Only the Titans and Giants were existences on the same level as the Titan Giant. As for humans, perhaps the Titan Giants would respect powerful individuals, but when it came to matters of the Titan Giant species, the Titan Giants would always try to suppress the Titan Giants. This was also the foundational reason why I had delayed my arrival to Dragon City, even though I had already entered Dragon World. If I had come here so easily, not only would the dragons not take me seriously, the dragons probably wouldn't even give me a chance to negotiate. Can't do it? Can you? If you can, then do it. We'll pay you. If you can't, then you'll just have to go somewhere else. Yep, it's another way of saying, please scram. That was why I had to do something even if it was possible for us to sit down and negotiate. Even if I hadn't met that foolish dragon, I would have taken the initiative to cause trouble. The dragons' personality? They're nothing more than wild beasts who bully the weak and fear the strong. It's fine if you say that it's the law of the jungle, but is there a fundamental difference between the two? According to my understanding of the dragons, if you beg for mercy or mercy, they'll completely ignore you. If you want to negotiate with them on equal terms, they'll laugh at you for being foolish. If you really want to make friends with them and negotiate with them on equal terms, beat them up first. Some people agreed with my opinion. The harder you beat them up and the more pain they'll feel, the more they'll treat you as someone important. The friendlier you are, the more they'll treat you as nothing important. As for this immemorial white dragon who had come to me to be killed as an example to others, he had already been tacitly forgotten by everyone. If he didn't show up, I would have to think of other ways to cause trouble for him. This was also why I had borrowed a set of god equipment. I had the intention of wiping Dragon City off the map if it was necessary, and then negotiating with them. After all, what I hoped to obtain from the negotiation was far too important to anyone. Dragon World, or perhaps I should say a part of Dragon World, is our ultimate goal. Only with Dragon World will it be possible for our next plan to be realized. This was the ultimate goal that I had revealed to my subordinates and Ale. Doubtlessly, the dragons had treated Dragon World as their personal property from the very start. If we wanted to take a tooth from the tiger's mouth, how could we not be forceful? The dragons had strengthened the Titan Giants' seal only because the moment the Titan Giants broke free from the seal, this sealed dimension would collapse. If it weren't for this reason, why would the dragons be willing to fight to the death against the Titan Giants and the Titan Giants? In that case, although from a certain standpoint we had the same interests as the dragons, and neither of us wanted the Titan Giants to revive and cause the entire dimension to be destroyed, we were actually more like thieves who had their hands in the same pocket. After all, neither of us was the true master of this dimension. Of course, just relying on negotiation would be far from enough. That was why I had prepared many little tricks. Sometimes, when I'm unscrupulous, even I'm afraid of myself. If you really do as you please, you'll definitely be able to enter the top 10 calamity rankings if word gets out. I was standing in a corner of the banquet hall. There was no one else around me. Due to the incident just now, although I was in a way the main character of this banquet, the host had obviously disliked me. What was surprising yet reasonable was that Harlois had become the main character of this banquet. Many people kept inviting this beautiful gold elf princess to dance with them, expressing their regret for the Gold Elf Empire's former glory and their disdain for the ungrateful High Elves. Although the Gold Elf Empire at its peak might not have been stronger than the dragons, ordinary dragons would definitely show respect to the Gold Elf Empire. Many of the current Gold Elf elders had come from that generation. From a certain standpoint, Harloi's status was actually quite noble. Even dragons would have to lower their heads before her. It was just that she was previously an undead, which prevented her from interacting with the dragons. However, I could only listen to these words. It would be impossible for the dragons to actually demand justice for the Gold Elves. Since they had friendly relations with the Gold Elf Empire in the past, it was only natural that they would have friendly relations with the Kingdom of the Elves now as well. It wasn't like they needed to pay any money to express their sympathy or reprimand. I leisurely looked at Harlois, who was surrounded by the crowd, and chatted with her through our spiritual connection. At the same time, my attention was focused on the banquet before me. Could this be the stinger meat of a scorpion dragon? It's said to be super delicious. Wow, there's even ancient elven fruit wine. Judging from the smell, it seems to be mixed with fruit juice. I really want to drink it. Unfortunately, no matter how much I wanted to drink it, I was unable to do so right now. Right now, I had to do my best to wear an unpredictable smile and a body full of god equipment while standing in a corner like a cool decoration. Although nobody was looking for me, countless gazes were constantly looking at me. If I exposed my current emotions, it would cause a series of problems in the future. Of course, the dragons wouldn't be too rude. When the dragon descendant musician at the banquet switched to a gentler song, Horus, who was currently the most authoritative elder, stood in front of me and did his best to smile. Even though I couldn't read minds, I could tell that he was cursing under his smile. He was probably cursing, "Why did you bring a body full of god equipment here for no reason?" Yet, he didn't dare to offend me too much. After all, I wasn't just talking about the mage country. Ayla's faction was far more useful than the mage country's faction. However, since he smiled at me without saying anything, I naturally smiled back at him without saying anything. Hee hee. And then, I fell silent. His Highness Roland, what do you think about the Titan Giant seal? Alright then, Horus forced himself to change the topic. However, he immediately started talking about the most important part of our discussion. It was obvious that this elder Horus wasn't very good at negotiating. Or perhaps, as a dragon's, he didn't really need any negotiating skills. All he needed to do was pressure me. And then I smiled. I loved new negotiators like him the most. They were sincere, easy to fool. Easy to communicate with. That was why I casually started talking about how to scare him. We do indeed have some conclusions. These are the conclusions of the Truth Symposium, and they've also been confirmed by Ale. Their accuracy should be trustworthy. I paused mid-sentence. As I expected, countless ears were perking up to eavesdrop on me. This matter concerned every dragon's personal interests, so of course they would pay attention to it. The Titan Giant's seal will be broken sooner or later, and Dragon World will definitely collapse. Chapter 410. What would happen when multiple Chaos main gods appeared on the same battlefield? Everything would descend into chaos and fear. All dimensional laws would become chaotic, and as the Chaos main gods went all out, the collapse of order would become even more obvious. There was not a single ray of light in the sky. Even those with night vision wouldn't be able to see more than 100 meters away. Everything would be devoured by the Light Eater. There was no need for dark clouds to exist. Dimensional cracks were torn open one after another. It was likely that nobody knew what was behind those dimensional cracks. After all, the unlucky ones who were devoured still hadn't returned yet. The laws of gravity were rewritten. Gigantic rocks suddenly rose up and then suddenly fell down. The apocalyptic scene from the legends was right before everyone's eyes. Mortals returned to an ancient battle between gods. This land had experienced far too many battles. The dimensional laws here had long since been broken. Unlike the Battle of the Hades, where the gods of the Hades maintained the stability of the battlefield, this area had long since lost the protection of the Earth God. In such a battlefield, just surviving would be a glorious achievement worthy of being recorded in the myth. But right now, surviving was truly difficult. The bronze war god smiled in delight as he swung his heavy sword. His sword shattered numerous mountains and city walls. Mortals wouldn't attract his attention at all, but any unlucky person who was within range of his charge would have no chance of escaping. Those who were trampled to death would be the luckiest. They would die far too quickly and painlessly. Those who were enveloped by his domain of wrath would sink into an eternal battle, killing and being killed until the very last drop of their blood. This wasn't any sort of domain ability or supernatural ability. It was just that when Donati's sank into a berserk battle, all intelligent creatures around him would be affected by his emotions and fall into a never-ending berserk battle just like him. The black-winged demon in the sky also gave up on the prey before him. He glided through the sky, seeming slow but actually quite fast as he circled around Donati's. As for whether his prey was me or Donati's, it was likely that even he himself didn't know. That was because every single word of Donati's the deceiver would be lacking in authenticity and credibility. A pincer attack from two main gods? I'm truly honored. I smiled wryly as I lightly gripped my holy light sword and released a blinding light. My dawn holy light sword that dispelled the darkness became the only source of light. The blinding light inadvertently revealed my boiling fighting spirit. How long has it been since I've been able to fight to my heart's content without considering anything? Perhaps I was influenced by Donati's fighting spirit, or perhaps it was because I had nowhere else to retreat. I actually felt my blood boil for a moment. But in the main god's hands, worlds apart, worlds apart, worlds apart, everything was different. Worlds apart in the hands of a main god. The instantaneous change in perspective was now meaningless. My intuition told me that Donati's was already standing right in front of me. That thunderous roar that made my ears ring was only the sound of the wind caused by his sword swinging. My ears and eyes had lost their function, but my intuition and instincts were furiously warning me that a fatal threat was right above my head. Yet, I could only slowly mutter in a low voice. The tiny lightsaber wasn't even comparable to a toothpick in front of the war god's super-heavy sword. However, the instant that the two swords clashed, the entire world could hear the sound of thunder. The lightless battlefield was illuminated by white light. This was a scorching flash that far surpassed the brightness of the sun in the daytime. After everyone lost their light, they were once again blinded by the excessive light. Thanks to that flash of light, everyone witnessed an inconceivable scene. Even the main god devourer, Barbarat, who was in the middle of a frenzied slaughter, was so shocked that his jaw dropped. The invincible god of war was like an unlucky guy who had been hit by a giant truck. He flew backward like a bullet and rolled in the sky. Then, he landed on the ground and continued rolling, smashing through two fortresses and a huge mountain. The undefeatable war god was sent flying as if he were a newbie who had just been hit by a giant truck. The invincible god of war was like a rookie who had just come out of the oven. He was directly sent flying like a baseball. Even Donati's was unable to handle the frightening power. Even though he was already rolling on the ground to reduce the impact, he was still unable to move for quite a while. But judging from Barty's increasingly fervent gaze, this long-forgotten pain actually stimulated his desire to fight. Ha 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 ha, as expected of Roland. That battle against the Hades back then was so fun, and now you've given me another surprise. Let's go again. Donati's tried to use his arms to stand up, but he failed twice. Only now did he discover that his body, which was made of adamantine, was also unable to handle the power of this attack. His entire arm was now covered in cracks. My maniacal laughter could be heard from half the battlefield, but I didn't receive any response. That was because I was currently doing my best to dig myself out from the ground. Tui tui tui, it's all sand. I half knelt on the ground with my golden holy sword stabbed into the ground with blinding wings of light surrounding it. I helplessly looked at my right arm and right hand, which should have been holding my sword. I only have half of my body left. Isn't this too ridiculous? There was nothing on the right side of my body where my arm should have been. There was no need to worry about me cosplaying as Yang Guo, because half of my shoulder had disappeared without a trace. With such a heavy injury, I should have died already. However, my wound was mysteriously covered in a faint white light, and not a single drop of blood flowed out. As expected, I shouldn't have foolishly faced you head-on. I was forced to use my trump card so quickly. That's such a waste. I was even intending to use it against you in the future when I wanted to trade blows with you. Dawn's holy sword's wings of light unfurled in front of me. The Lord of Thunder's shadow furiously flapped his wings in an attempt to fly away, but finally calmed down. Meanwhile, more and more light gathered on my wound. I no longer had the time to worry about my wound. The black-winged Sophocles was about to begin his second round of attack. I had originally thought that Donati's pitiful state would cause the cautious Sophocles to retreat yet again. However, this only stimulated Sophocles' vicious nature as a demon. Even though Sophocles' golden armor that was covered in flashing magical runes seemed rather laughable, the vicious expression on his face revealed his determination. It would be worth it even if he was seriously injured if he could take this chance to deal with such a terrifying opponent. When the light on the right side of my body dissipated, my right arm and body returned to normal. I unfurled my wings of light, picked up my holy sword, and flew towards the wind. You want to beat me up while I'm down? Try to show off your own strength first. F you. I'm Sophocles. This time, my light sword and heavy sword didn't clash. My wings of light and the gigantic demon slowly approached each other. Darkness and light. TSK. Just as we were about to clash, I flew downwards while he flew upwards. Both of us missed each other. Why didn't you dodge if you had the guts? What a cowardly mortal! As expected, you don't have the courage to fight me head-on. Sophocles couldn't see through my ability just now, so he didn't dare to fight me head-on. I also felt that Sophocles definitely wasn't the type to fight me head-on. He definitely had some tricks up his sleeve. Ha, I've already seen through your tricks. Isn't it just some light-absorbing armor from the Heletum generation? I've played with it so much that I don't even want it anymore. Did you get it at the Sky Tower last time? How is that possible? How could you possibly know? I've already buried everyone who knows about this. And now, it was my turn to be rendered speechless. I casually told him that I was telling the truth. I also carefully kept my distance from Sophocles. Last time, I saw that he was seriously injured. He had even taken out the Solar Energy Storage Armor X blueprint to create his own armor for himself. This rare item that the Heletum generation invented was the natural enemy of light. Although it was called a Solar Energy Storage Armor, it was actually capable of forcefully absorbing all types of light. Back when I was looking at the blueprint in the ruins, I had exclaimed that this item was the natural enemy of holy light. If it wasn't for the fact that the materials needed were so difficult to obtain, I would have even created one to defeat the Holy Light Church by myself. Cough, cough, let's focus on figuring out how a powerful demon managed to obtain so many light element materials. Sophocles didn't dare to directly attack, but someone else did. Not only that, there were two of them. Donates's gigantic sword and bloody scythe simultaneously attacked Sophocles. Donates had already arrived in front of me while laughing maniacally. Seeing how exciting the battle was, he unhesitatingly gave up on his wailing toy as he smiled viciously. This time, Donates was being ganged up on by three main gods, all of whom were seriously on guard. It was likely that no matter who won or lost, this battle would go down in history. My previous attack was no longer usable. As the first mortal to be ganged up on and killed by multiple main gods, I could now die in peace. As if. I could only helplessly sigh as I faced the pressure of being ganged up on. I tossed aside my holy sword. Hey, brothers, someone wants to gang up on me and bully me with numbers. What do you say? There was no response. All right then, it seemed that talking nicely to these bastards was useless. You're the one. Little fire dragon. Wondrous frog seed. Two clouds of black mist appeared in the direction his arm was pointing. One blocked Donates and the other blocked Barbarat. Donates's gigantic black sword was blocked by a lightning spear, while his bloody scythe was broken by a spiked mace. Donates was sent flying again, and this time, that gigantic devourer main god also accompanied him. Who's the little red dragon? I am the creator goddess' most beloved eldest son, the Titan. Who's the wondrous frog seed? I am the apex of despair and regret, Hymer. Chapter 411. H's New Year's First News Summary? So it wasn't written by the fairies? It's a new journal jointly created by San Antonio, the Mage Country, and several other major countries. Just the number of copies sold in each country is astonishing. Whoever controls public opinion will have the right to speak. Nobody's an idiot these days. This morning, a blue dragon suddenly flew over the campsite. Apart from the invitation, there was also this journal in the gift bag it threw down. Although it wasn't printed in color, the paper was excellent, the wording was exquisite, and the content was well illustrated. Let me see what important news it is that requires a high-speed delivery. I immediately closed the journal the moment I flipped to the first page. Ultraman fighting against small monsters? Doesn't that sound a little wrong? The headlines already seemed ridiculous, but the silly cat scurried out from a corner. Let me see, what Ultraman? It's obviously the cloud giants that vanished from the world have returned to the mortal world. In the battle between Bardi and the Holy Church, they viciously taught the dragons a lesson. Halent's army was forced to retreat after a bitter battle. Cloud giants? There are actually cloud giants in the mortal plane. I had to say that glowing giant really did seem like the legendary Ultraman, the Giant of Light. The dragons that were being beaten up by the cloud giants really did seem like small monsters that were shouting shameful lines. Cloud giants were one of the strongest subspecies of the giant species. They were known as the Titan's favored children. Cloud giants were the tallest of all giants and had the most extravagant appearances. It was said that all of them were handsome men and beautiful women who wore extravagant clothing. They were also born with natural talent for controlling clouds and mist, and were skilled at learning divine art. However, most people were known for their outstanding talent in art and music. Many majestic palaces were built by them, and bards would sing about their works and treat them as their teachers. Of course, since the giants were also the most intelligent, they could produce mages, priests, and other combat job classes. They were also one of the few giants that were skilled at organizing and fighting in group. Perhaps they weren't as skilled as the lava giants, who were skilled in martial arts, but a group of cloud giants would definitely be the scariest of all giants. It had been a long time since anyone had seen cloud giants in the mortal plane. It was said that they had left the mortal plane in order to escape from the curse of stupidity. However, it seemed that these legendary peace-loving and art-loving giants had still made a decision under the summons of their ancestors. If it was a cloud giant, Halent's defeat would be understandable. Not only that, they were able to remotely control the outside world while sealed. We need to be even more vigilant against the Titans. But the most eye-catching part was a sentence written in red at the back of this article. P.S. Legend has it that angels appeared in this battle. However, according to our investigations, they were only mercenaries from the Winged Tribe who voluntarily participated in this battle. The despicable Holy Church used these Winged Tribe members as angels in order to shake the Bardi warriors' resolve. Angels have appeared. Yes, but didn't the higher-ups say that it's the Winged Tribe? Considering the political stance of this magazine, yep, since it was jointly published by the royalty, they naturally wouldn't go along with the Holy Church's wishes. If it said that the angels were the Winged Tribe, I felt that it was more likely that the angels were angels. After all, the difference between the Winged Tribe and the angels was like the difference between a hen and a phoenix. The former were only humans that could fly, while the latter had an ancient bloodline comparable to dragons. It would be far too obvious if they fought on the battlefield. Considering how angels had a high status in the hearts of ordinary humans in Aichi, they were extremely positive characters in all sorts of myths and legends, and also acted as the gods' messengers. If angels really appeared on the Holy Church's side, it would naturally be a severe blow to the newly risen Church of pure holy light. And if angels appeared on the Holy Church's side, it would also cause ordinary warriors to waver. Not to mention, angel warriors were generally quite strong in combat. In that case, if the Holy Church's expeditionary army had the help of angels and cloud giants, Halent's defeat would be completely understandable. Are the enemies pure angels and art-loving cloud giants? We have so many undead and evil dragons on our side, as well as dark elves, evil underground creatures, and greedy goblins. Why do I feel like we're the antagonists? You just realized? The enemy faction has cloud giants and angels. I'm afraid that our morale will be affected. It doesn't matter. Race isn't a righteous reason, nor is it a reason to slaughter. Why should we be troubled by the opinions of those idiots? I wasn't worried about our side's morale. It was that a large portion of the angel tribe had already become the Order True God's subordinates. Since they were participating in a mortal battle, It was highly likely that some god had decided to interfere. And based on my understanding of the Holy Church's fanatics, when they feel that they've received the god's favor and feel that their actions represent the god's will, even the most vile actions will become holy. Even the most evil intentions will be viewed as the god's benevolence. Rather than believing in the logic of fanatics, it's better to believe that villains whose hands are covered in blood will voluntarily repent. Speak like a human. A great massacre and purge. Then, they'll confidently prepare to fight all the way to the Bardi capital. They'll furiously increase their troops and force other countries to join the Holy Light Army. They'll escalate this small-scale battle into an Armageddon. I believe that they're capable of doing such a thing. That's far too direct. But I have to say, the more I think about it, the more likely it seems. This is completely the Holy Church that we understand. If the Holy Church appears victorious and uses the name of the Holy Light to summon other major countries that believe in the Holy Light to participate in this battle, it might directly escalate into a world war. There were some things that Harlois didn't say out loud, but we all understood. Bardi was a mega-empire, after all. Bardi had accumulated an astonishing amount of resources and wealth. It was obvious that Bardi was on the losing end of the war against Bardi. Those greedy predators now had a righteous excuse to attack Bardi. How could they possibly miss out on such a good opportunity? I put down this journal and fell into a state of confusion. At the same time as the game's history, the entire world had entered the Vulture of War expansion pack. The elves and beastmen were at war, and the major countries were fighting each other for the sake of ambition. I originally thought that I had avoided the worst possible outcome, but I never expected that the game's history would be so unpredictable. I actually mysteriously returned to the beginning. No, the situation has already changed. The Bardi Empire in the game's history is destined to be destroyed. No matter how it develops, the ending won't be any worse than this. Besides, it's only a local war right now. It might not come to that. I just need to hurry up. I opened up this journal again, intending to take a look at what else had happened recently. Thud. However, I only took a single glance before I dropped the journal on the ground. The second page of the Bardi Empire's battlefield contained even more infuriating news. San Antonio has declared war on the Foss Empire, Siwan Dukedom, and other countries. Both sides' night squadrons have already exchanged fire on the Siwan Dukedom's Yao Bear Plains. San Antonio has achieved a great victory. I had an icy expression as I flipped to the next page. This only made me more and more annoyed. The Swallow Federation demands that the Kasola Kingdom hand over the seal of the sea god that they stole. Marshal Ben emphasizes that if the Kasola Kingdom continues to remain silent, the Swallow Federation will consider waging war to take back their national treasure. New sea tribes and sea monsters have appeared on the Ottoman Empire's borders. Lady Storm's priests and priestesses have appeared on the battlefield. Organized sea giants have also joined the battle. The war between the Ottoman Empire and the Sea Tribe has escalated. The Heen Kingdom of the Elves has announced that it will become the San Heen Empire. Moon Elf Queen Afina has declared herself the new Elven Empress. She also demands that all other Elven kingdoms submit to her. 16 kingdoms of the Elves have declared their allegiance, and 23 kingdoms have declared war on the Elven Empire. The Elven Civil War has begun. Silly cat, don't tear. What am I supposed to see if you tear it? Boiling black mana began to boil on the silly cat's body. A screaming banshee shadow formed on the black cat's body. This was the first time I had ever seen Harlois so angry. It was evident that she was truly angry. I wisely ignored Harlois, who was currently bristling with anger. From a certain standpoint, the re-establishment of the Gold Elf Empire would perhaps have new historical significance for ordinary elves. However, for a Gold Elf descendant like Harlois, this would be nothing more than a traitor wearing the crown that originally belonged to her. This was a deep-seated hatred that she would never forgive. As I continued reading, I found many similar news articles. Some of them didn't seem very interesting, but if I really thought about them, they would be quite troublesome. Traces of gigantic insectoids have been discovered in the North Sea. These insectoids have incredibly high combat strength and are naturally resistant to magic. They are suspected to be an immemorial species. A large number of ogres have appeared in the San Anton Empire's Ocephalon region. There are many subspecies of ogres in the snowy plains, mountain cliffs, and forests. The San Anton Empire's government is warning all nearby residents to be on high alert. They'll be organizing a crusade soon. So many troublesome things happened at the same time. This seemed like a coincidence, but it was actually a type of necessity. Now that the Holy War had begun, the ambitions that had been suppressed for thousands of years were finally unrestrained. Now that the winter had passed, it was time for the long-prepared plans to begin in spring. The ambitious individuals who had been prepared for this for a long time finally extended their tentacles, and the world of Aichi was now filled with many things. I closed this magazine and glanced at the silly cat, who was still fuming with anger for no reason. Her ethereal shadow was constantly screaming while her physical body was glaring at the magazine. I shook my head. Some things seemed like I had let go of them, but they had always been in my heart. They were weaknesses that no one would be willing to touch. If anyone dared to touch the land in the Northlands, I would probably end up just like her. I would act like an injured beast, hide in a corner, and roar at everyone. As for Harloise, perhaps the scars in her heart that she didn't want to be opened up the most was the elven crown that had originally belonged to the Gold Elves. How many generations of inheritance and how many former Gold Elves' glory had finally fallen from her hands? The pain of losing her country? The pain of being betrayed by someone she trusted? The feeling of helplessness as she watched everything head towards Armageddon? Perhaps it was because we were both in the same boat and recalled the Mist Kingdom back in the day. Or perhaps it was because I simply didn't want to see anyone bully my pet, but I felt rather sad and displeased as I looked at this silent ethereal shadow. That was why I made this promise. Relax. As long as I'm here, no matter who it is, they'll never be able to easily wear this crown that belongs to the Gold Elves. Chapter 412. Chaos Girl? What's that? After my usual information gathering, I actually found an interesting rumor, or rather, a rumor. The general idea was that Empress Maria was the reincarnation of some powerful demon in the Chaos Abyss, which was why she was born with an incredibly high affinity for the Chaos Abyss and became the strongest demon warlock in the world. And as long as she successfully ruled over San Antonio, there would be a demon invasion, the world would be destroyed, and so on and so forth. No one would take such a rumor seriously. Even the peddlers on the street thought that it was a rumor spread by Prince Winston. After all, there had been far too many rumors about Maria being a demon's daughter and a demon conspirator in the past few years. But someone just happened to believe it. Pope Coloma I believed it. I, the most devout priest of the Holy Light, Pope Coloma I, declare that Maria is Soline, the enemy of the Holy Light. Soline is the enemy of the Holy Light. All believers of the Holy Light must purify this filthy woman. The next day, early in the morning, such notices were posted everywhere in San Antonio's capital city. Isn't this way too unsightly? I felt rather helpless. Wasn't it already noisy enough for them to do such a thing at a time like this? San Antonio had the word holy in front of its name, which was a clear indication of its religious orientation. Most of its citizens believed in the Holy Light. Using divine authority to suppress royal authority was indeed a good idea. Having the Pope declare Maria a heretic would deprive Maria of her royal authority. This would be an excellent move in a political battle, but there was still a war going on. Weren't they worried that she would actually join the Chaos Abyss out of anger? Even if she was going to kill the donkey after it left the millstone, she should at least wait until she was done grinding the rice. She still controlled half of San Antonio, yet you didn't follow the rules at all. Demons wouldn't accept human surrender, but Maria was a demon warlock, a mage with demon blood flowing in her. She could completely transform into a demon through a demonization ritual, which would be completely impossible to deal with. If things really reached that point, and the rumors became true, that was probably what Pope Coloma and Winston were hoping for. I, the diviner of pure holy light, Estrada's successor, the strongest holy light knight in the world, Roland Hayes, declare Maria Soline, a devout believer of the holy light. So, at noon that day, I flew into the sky shamelessly. While cosplaying as an artificial sun, I roared at the audience. The Southern sect's belief in the pure holy light was already widespread in this world. San Antonio didn't lack believers. I then wrote a letter to the Southern sect. I estimated that they would send Maria's holy title in a few days. Between the two sects, one accusing someone of heresy, and the other praising someone as a pious saint, it had become a conflict of beliefs between the two religious branches. When I landed, Pope Coloma looked at me as if he wanted to eat me alive. However, I shrugged, indicating that it had nothing to do with me. I saint, Pope, I Pope, holy Pope, I Maria, Pope said. It was quite amusing to see the old Pope glaring and blowing his nose in anger. I replied sincerely. I've also received reliable information. Queen Maria is indeed a devout believer of the holy light. I swear by the holy light. My pure holy light proved that I wasn't lying. According to my private information sources, this demon warlock was indeed an incredibly strange believer of the holy light. He wouldn't have come up with such an excuse if he didn't want to go against the Holy Church. Pope Coloma was so angry that he wanted to fight me to the death. However, his cardinal stopped him, probably because he was worried that he wouldn't be able to defeat me. Actually, I wasn't really afraid of a powerful holy light user. As one of the strongest holy light users in the world, I wouldn't be afraid of most holy light divine art. If worse came to worst, I could just turn around and run away if he used God's descent. No, perhaps this was a good opportunity. God's descent, Pope Coloma. I really want to see the God of Holy Light's fourth incarnation. One was killed by Ale, one was killed in another dimension, and one was blasted by a forbidden spell. You must have used up a lot of divine power. Pope Coloma was so angry that he almost had a brain hemorrhage when he saw me blaspheme a god. In the end, Pope Coloma, who would get so angry that he would start stuttering and wheezing whenever he saw me, went to the front lines as planned. I was happy to have some peace of mind. Meanwhile, I had originally thought that Prince Winston would kick me out if I talked about Maria. However, he actually treated me even more kindly, and even invited me to talk privately with him many times. Don't misunderstand. I really wasn't the one who spread those rumors. That lord acting on his own gives me quite a headache as well. As a soldier, I still have common sense. If I start another civil war at this time, I'll become the entire country's greatest sinner. He spoke quite sincerely, but it was fine to just listen to politicians. I had seen many more ridiculous and foolish decisions for the sake of power and benefit. Your Highness, I'm telling the truth. No matter who spread such rumors and even caused that lord to declare Maria a heretic, not only is he trying to take Maria's life, he's even trying to shake the foundations of all of San Antonio. It seemed that even Pope Coloma noticed my overly perfunctory expression. I hurriedly nodded. Yes, I understand. I believe you. Your expression shows that you don't believe me at all. I'm really telling the truth. Even if there's a civil war, it should wait until the holy war is over. Yep, the truth. Pope Coloma was so depressed that he wanted to cry, but I was inwardly praising his excellent acting skills. His expression and attitude were so perfect that I almost believed him. How much was the difference? The difference was probably more than 300 years. The 14-year-old me would definitely have believed him. I didn't intend to stay in the capital city for long. I finished comparing the geographical information from the royal palace and confirmed the most likely locations for the ruins. I then immediately said goodbye to Pope Coloma. My only regret was that I would have to put the matter of the Allied army on hold. Judging from San Antonio's current situation, they couldn't even take care of their own matters, so there was no time to worry about anything else. But before I left, I unexpectedly received a thank you letter and an invitation from Maria. She probably wanted me to visit her and thank me for my assistance. Of course, I wouldn't refuse such an invitation since I could establish a relationship with one of San Antonio's true authorities. Even if I had to take a roundabout route, I would still go. Especially now, when San Antonio was still the #1 food storage country in all of Ike, while the Mist Alliance behind me was the #1 military weapons supplier in all of Ike. As long as we worked together, it would naturally be a great deal. What? Why didn't she try to sell them to Winston? Winston had a kingdom knight, the Holy Church's assistants, as well as Pope Coloma and Cardinal Rosario's personal assistants. Why would he possibly use our weapons and equipment? It could be said that the moment that the Holy Church declared Maria to be a heretic, the enemy of an enemy had the potential to become a friend. She thus became our natural ally. But as I traveled to San Antonio, I noticed that something was off. The rumors about the Abyssal Girls have spread too quickly and too widely. Chapter 4:13. From a certain standpoint, my duel with conservation was a typical mage style. Careful observation, probing attacks that didn't aim for success, but only to avoid making mistakes. Careful observation of conservation's weaknesses, defending against conservation's probing attacks, and so on. Of course, there was also the sudden final attack that was more than enough to take conservation's life. That was why a duel between two mages would usually be quite boring. Mages would first summon cannon fodder and cast defensive spells to make sure that they were undefeatable. Only then would they begin casting spells to probe their opponent's strength. They would either destroy the enemy's cannon fodder or try to remove the enemy's defenses. The first to expose one's own weakness would be the loser. In that case, if it wasn't for the fact that there was a tremendous difference in power level, it was quite possible that a duel between two academic mages would last for 2 or 3 hours. Since most of the mages' attention was focused on defense and personal safety, the duel wouldn't be very interesting. But even though this was a normal mage duel, my duel with conservation was slightly different. The snow-white ice castle walls suffered repeated attacks. Even the vanguard of the undead mysteriously transformed into ice sculptures. However, the remaining undead didn't retreat. That was because undead creatures lacked fear to begin with. They didn't care about morale at all. The will of the undead lords was above all else. Charge. Step on your own kind. The undead army's inexplicable will converged into a will that was almost corporeal. It was as if there was an invisible skeleton lord howling in the void. The high-level undead knight climbed up his subordinate's corpse and was the first to reach the top of the castle walls. But before he could rejoice at his success, the next instant, a chill attacked him from under his feet, transforming him into an ice sculpture. But the next instant, his undead knight acolyte stepped on his corpse and also transformed into an ice sculpture. Then, another skeleton general continued to step on her corpse, even though this was a bottomless abyss that silently devoured everything. The black undead army continued to advance unwaveringly, as if they were man-eating ants that nobody dared to stop. If it's a river, fill it up. If it's a volcano, extinguish it. Although it seems quite foolish, it's indeed a practical method. After all, magic also requires energy as a source of energy, and energy will eventually run out. That's the most basic law of magic. Since it was a spell that required physical contact to be effective, then I would just use corpses to isolate it. If it was a spell that could spread, then I would use cannon fodder to consume all of the curse and negative energy. If it was a spell that was limited by its functions and rules, then I would use cannon fodder to test out all the rules. This was the foundational reason why the undead army could sweep through all countries. No matter how powerful or defensive magic was, or how powerful your offensive magic was, as long as you had enough cannon fodder, even the most powerful spell would have a limit. Even the most powerful spell would be exhausted to death. The black flood always moved forward slowly. It seemed slow and sluggish, as if it could escape with just a few steps. However, it was impossible to stop it. No matter where it escaped to, the result would be the same. This was the undead calamity, the king of pestilence that everyone viewed as death itself. But in this battle between undead emperors, this was nothing more than an appetizer. She had as many cannon fodder as she wanted. Of course, I had my own way of dealing with conservation. But before that, I needed to deal with conservation's magical attacks first. Conservation had finished casting her spell. A pitch-black cloud flew over from the distance, but it instantly shattered into pieces when it got close. The cloud instantly enveloped all of Cloud City, filling the entire city with a dense black mist. The dark clouds in front of him weren't offensive spells. Instead, they were a layer of pitch-black fog in which countless dark elves were circling and fantasizing. They couldn't tell up from down, down from left, and the lack of a sense of direction and vision made all attacks a joke. A special magic? Yep, I've probably never seen this before in the mortal plane. It's probably a special application of negative energy. It's even capable of blocking out soul vision. This mist has the scent of souls. It's probably a sacrificial divine art that uses undead subordinates as sacrificial sacrifices. Using soul shards to block out soul vision? That's quite a creative idea. I nodded in agreement. My inference was pretty much the same. Having an encyclopedia was great. Many inferences could be instantly verified. In that case, since I knew the general principles behind this spell, I should be able to find a way to counter it. Purify, no absorb. Using a soul magic in front of a soul magic master? What a joke. Under my command, the national-level soul summoning tower in the center of Yongye City was fully activated. The soul shards in the mist weren't even able to resist as they were directly absorbed by the soul summoning tower. The mist of death that blocked vision actually became the cloud summoning tower's new energy source. The cloud summoning tower's energy had dropped from 90% to 92%. Even though I had the upper hand, I couldn't help but feel anxious. I'm afraid that she's already prepared her next spell. This was the difference in tempo between mages. An undead emperor with an undead army was also capable of casting spells. It was basically the equivalent of me taking one step for every 2 steps she took. A novice would probably be delighted at being able to nullify the enemy's attack, while I would have a headache because I had lost the initiative. I knew that once the tempo was pulled away and the advantage accumulated to the point where I couldn't handle it anymore, that would be the critical moment to decide the victor. The difference between us was obvious from the very start. Her undead army's movements were also a threat to me. She had plenty of cannon fodder to use right from the start, while I could only deal with her every move. The further I went, the more difficult it would be to deal with her. This meant that I would have to simultaneously deal with 2 of her moves for every step I took. As I expected, where did this big guy come from? Right after the black mist dissipated, I saw a gigantic bone giant that had already stepped over my ice wall. This bone giant had originally been heading in our direction, but when he noticed that the mist surrounding the Cloud City was beginning to dissipate, he unhesitatingly gave up on attacking the city before him and immediately changed directions to break through this abnormal world. Bone giants weren't a rare type of undead soldier. Both an innate giant's body and an acquired giant's bone structure could create such a killing machine. High-level undead mages would usually create such undead creatures to attack cities. After all, bone giants were both conspicuous and slow. Not only would they easily attract troublesome opponents, they would also consume a tremendous amount of energy. It wouldn't be worth it to use them against small targets. No, this isn't an ordinary bone giant. But compared to his slow companions, this silver-gray giant was very agile. The frequency at which his feet moved was so fast that it created intermittent seismic wave. His eyes were not flickering with the soul fire of the undead, but with a sapphire-embedded magic diamond probe. His other eye was also emitting a red light that looked like an infrared ray. He wasn't wielding a giant sword or battle axe, or any other cold weapon. Instead, he was wielding a spear that was currently emitting scorching flames. I could even see the traces of screws and welded plates at the critical points of the spear. His body was also covered in steel armor, and on his feet, I could even see support wheels and a flamethrower. Undead Gundam, did I come to the wrong theater? Is this the new species that the dragon Lich mentioned? I could faintly sense that this bone giant's body contained many independent souls. This bone giant was actually nothing more than a vehicle. The pilot's cabin seemed to be located in his abdomen. This was obviously no ordinary undead magic. At the very least, an undead emperor who had been hiding in the undead plains for so many years wouldn't be able to create such a combination of magic and engineering. My first impression of this bone giant was quite terrible. Not only was it powerful, but its appearance meant that the most troublesome situation was about to occur. The undead had either obtained the Halettum Plains inheritance, or they had allied with the owner of the inheritance. Our enemy was no longer just an undead emperor. Perhaps it was because Yongya City had far too much energy, or perhaps it was because the higher-ups had given an absolute order, but this bone giant, which was obviously our ace, didn't intend to fight to the death against Yongya City. It passed through the ice wall and simply continued forward, attempting to break through our defenses. Tim Lad will probably like such a gift. Of course, that's only if you can accept it in its entirety. Of course. Any ordinary powerful individual would have been scared half to death by this. But in the eyes of experienced individuals like us, this bone giant was nothing more than a toy. Not only that, it was an unimportant toy with a failed design. Tactical magic. Stone to mud. This spell smashed into the bone giant, instantly transforming the flat ground into a swamp. There was even more swamp beneath the swamp. It was too late for the bone giant to stop in time, so it suddenly jumped up, flames spitting out from its feet. It charged, exploded, and swung its leg with great force. This was a standard long jump, and then it somersaulted in midair before landing in a crater. Pfft, nice movement, but it didn't jump up at all. Of course. Bone giants don't have any muscles. It's already the limit for them to use magic to walk. They're only mimicking human movements because they're instincts. Does they really intend to do a long jump? Do they really think that this bone giant is some unscientific red jipper that can increase its speed by 3 times just by being painted? However, I didn't celebrate too early. High energy signals in the distance indicated that conservation had prepared yet another new spell. Some of the undead below were already breaking through the ice wall. It would seem that our tempo had fallen behind. Undead were crawling all over the ice wall. Conservation's willingness to sacrifice herself was truly moving. And so, I unhesitatingly created another ice wall, learning from her lesson. This time, I made it 2 meters taller and 3 meters wider than the first one. Keep going. Let's see how much cannon fodder you have. Although I sounded quite arrogant, I was actually rather unconfident. Ice walls like this that contained ice energy would consume far too much energy. Each time I used it, it would use up almost 10% of Yongya City's total energy. In order to ensure Yongya City's safety and combat strength, I didn't dare to use less than 50% of my energy. I wouldn't be able to use such an ice wall to stall for time many times. The most annoying thing was that he couldn't allow his opponent to maintain the initiative. He had to deal with every move that came his way. The situation would only become more and more disadvantageous. We would need time to counterattack. I'm going to the secondary tower. Leave the magical battle against conservation to me. You go and clear out the cannon fodder first. For once, Harloise was being diligent as she volunteered to take on this heavy responsibility. Her strategic decision was obviously correct. Since conservation was too far away, and it was impossible to eliminate her, it would indeed be a good idea to use the strategy of Tianji's horse race to suppress conservation's weak points and eliminate the annoying cannon fodder first. She's an undead emperor. We should at least be careful. Even with the Mage Tower's support, it would still be quite difficult for me to directly face off against an undead emperor. Invisible curses, dimensional sealing spells, and special negative energy permanent damage would all be enough to kill Harloise. However, Harloise chuckled as she slowly transformed into her human form. Her silky blonde hair reached the ground, and her familiar beautiful face appeared in front of me. Her breath smelled like orchids as she intentionally whispered into my ear. Undead Emperor? Who do you think I am? Who taught you undead magic? I'm the woman who taught you how to become an undead emperor. Now that I've accumulated enough, I'm also the woman who's about to become an undead emperor. Be careful of her? I'm hoping to obtain a chance to make a breakthrough in battle. Harloise transformed into a phantom as she giggled. I could now focus on the undead army below me. It was indeed quite reassuring to have such a trustworthy helper. What should I prepare next? It would be best if I can use a powerful spell that can kill off all the mid-level and high-level undead in one go. Since I have the Mage Tower's energy reserves, I might as well use up a bit of it. Chapter 4:14. If you were haggling with a store on the street and you said, "Give me this ring for 100 gold coins." But if the seller clearly knew that this ring was worth at least 1,000 gold coins, and he still said, "Sure, I'll give it to you, and I'll even give you a gift," how would you feel? In a normal situation, you would either feel that there was something wrong with the ring itself, or that the seller had some ulterior motive, or that the seller was plotting something against you. That was probably how I felt right now. Apart from that, I also felt like I had swung a heavy club but hit nothing but cotton. I had prepared so many tricks, so why did I give in so easily? Berserk dragon warriors were the pinnacle of alchemy and dragon studies. They were artificially created dragon followers. Without Barty's thousands of years of accumulation and extraordinary relationship with dragons, it would have been impossible for berserk dragon warriors to exist. It was said that these berserk dragon warriors were born with tremendous physical strength, 18+ strength. They could wear super heavy armor that no ordinary person would be able to wear. They were also equipped with giant dragon spears and axes that were more than 3 meters long. The moment they entered the battlefield, they would become unstoppable killing machines. The dragon bloodline's natural defensive scales and regenerative abilities gave these killing machines powerful endurance and recovery abilities on the battlefield. And if they were in danger, the dragon bloodline's desire for power would often give them limitless potential. Continuing to dragon transform would give them new power and even stronger basic stat. Of course, forcefully adding dragon bloodlines also had some irresistible weaknesses. The Berserk Dragon, Berserk Dragon, Berserk Dragon, served as a reminder to these valiant warriors that if they became obsessed with killing, they would forever lose the possibility of returning to their human form and the human heart. Dragon berserk warriors who returned from the cruelest battlefield would either uncontrollably dragon transformation into monsters or lose all sense of reason. On the other hand, the dragon shield defender was in a completely different category. If the dragon warrior was the sharpest flame spear, then the dragon shield defender was the strongest ice shield. However, unlike berserk dragon warriors, whose physical characteristics were abnormally obvious, these heavily armored and heavily shielded berserk dragon warriors were completely covered in armor. There wasn't much information on them, but as long as they appeared, they would usually achieve astonishing combat result. These berserk dragon warriors were skilled in group battles. In fact, there were even small teams of 3 to 5 that successfully slaughtered giant. The berserk dragon warriors' shields were 2 meters tall. As long as they were set up, they could form a magical defensive barrier. Just a small team would be able to provide the same level of defense as a city wall. However, you would get what you paid for. It was said that the armor and enchanted shields were all top-level goods. Every warrior in the entire Bardi Empire would be fully equipped and trained, and they would be at the level of a top-level silver-ranked warrior. There were only about 20 combat squads in the entire Bardi Empire that were capable of fighting 80,000 people. That seemed like a lot? But considering the fact that Berserk Dragon Bloodline warriors, 80,000 Berserk Dragon warriors wouldn't even won. That was why even the Bardi Empire didn't dare to use such expensive warriors in ordinary battles. In fact, the Bardi Empire wouldn't even give such an important national treasure to any prince apart from the Crown Prince. And now, as I flipped through the thick stack of training materials and alchemy recipes in my hands, I heard Harloise say, "They should be real, or they should be research results of the same level." I felt as if I was in a dream, and the tyrant who had just berated his ministers by shouting, "Give it to him!" I said, "Give it to him!" was now sitting in front of a table, smiling at me. One who is unaccountably solicitous is hiding evil intentions. I reflexively raised my guard as I looked at Orlos, who was smiling as if he were a profiteer who had just made a fortune. I didn't believe that a simple gift from Aso would be enough to cause him to obediently listen to my extortion. I reflexively raised my guard as I looked at Orlos, who was smiling as if he were a profiteer who had just made a lot of money. I doubted that a simple gift from Aso would be enough to make him lose his footing and obediently listen to my extortion. Never compromise with terrorists was a common rule in any world. This wasn't because major countries didn't want to give up their bargaining chip. It was because greed was boundless. Nobody knew whether or not terrorists would increase the price, or whether or not a temporary success would stimulate their enthusiasm for their next operation. And if such a compromise was announced, it would be a direct blow to the country's reputation, as well as exposing the country's weaknesses and inadequacies. And in the international world where the law of the jungle prevailed, exposing a country's weakness would attract greedy wolves. Next time, they wouldn't be ordinary terrorists. Judging from the fact that, "I'll spread the word Resident Evil if you don't give me the money," my actions this time could be categorized as such. In that case, Orlos's compromise was quite incomprehensible. It wasn't that he shouldn't have compromised, but at the very least, he wouldn't have so easily handed over such a treasure that was obviously a scam. If it were me, even if I had compromised in the end, I would have tried all sorts of methods to make the threat disappear. And even if I accepted Orlos's conditions, I would have made an additional request that forbade me from making any additional conditions, in order to resolve everything once and for all. I know that you're confused, but I've actually always been grateful to you. I know that you have many results in alchemy research, and that you have many dragons as allies. Treat this information as a small gift from me. Orlos used such an opening sentence, but I already knew what he was going to say. After all, Evelyn had once mentioned to me that Orlos seemed to be grateful to me for helping him escape from Aso's threat. However, what he said next was completely unexpected. "What I'm grateful for isn't just the undead. When I learned from Miss Evelyn that you lost your memories, I was quite astonished. Perhaps I should tell you about the seed I left behind back in the day. Amoy." The elderly butler was wearing formal attire, and his face was covered in wrinkles. He appeared quite old, but he reached out with his hand, and golden light gathered in his hand, transforming into a ball of holy light that illuminated the room. "This is impossible. Pure holy light wouldn't lie." This was indeed an outstanding holy night. But what astonished me was that not only did this Amoy not chant the name of holy light, he didn't even have the god of holy light's emblem on him. This was obviously against the god of holy light's teachings. In the past, before I used holy light, I would always praise the holy light or pretend to move my lips a few times, all so that I would appear no different from other holy night. And this Amoy before me, in a way, was quite similar to how I used holy light. He didn't chant the name of holy light. First generation Pope, you guessed correctly. Our southern sect doesn't worship the god of holy light. We worship holy light itself. In the eyes of the Holy Church, we're heretics that should be eradicated the most. While I was astonished at the content of this message, I was even more astonished at the abnormal way he addressed me. Lady Evelyn also mentioned that you lost your memories of your time in Bardi. Perhaps as the sixth pope of the southern sect and your successor, I should mention your glorious achievements from back in the day, and so, as the elderly man sighed, this dusty past was gradually revealed. The southern sect's official name should be the Church of Pure Holy Light. In the eyes of the Holy Church's higher-ups, they were probably just a sect that had some differences in understanding of the Holy Church's teachings. However, only the core members of the southern sect would know that this difference wasn't just a small difference. The southern sect didn't worship the god of holy light, they worshipped the purest form of holy light. The southern sect originated from the Bardi capital. The founder of the southern sect was Baron Blackhand, who went by the alias of Roland Blackhand. The establishment of the southern sect was greatly supported by the Bardi royalty back in the day. Ever since this small southern sect was created, its founder had given it a unique mission: to spread the true teachings of holy light and replace the Holy Church that was becoming more and more corrupted by the day. Right now, the southern sect has more than 200,000 worshippers. They're scattered all over Bardi and the various countries. They travel through time in the name of the Holy Church, but what they spread is the purest teachings of holy light. Actually, apart from our understanding of holy light, there's no obvious difference between us and ordinary holy light priests. In fact, I'm even the former Archbishop of the Holy Church in Bardi. It's precisely because of this that the old Pope didn't hesitate to start a holy war at all costs. After all, in his eyes, evil must die, but heresy must die even more. Although it didn't seem like much of a difference whether one worshipped the holy light or the god of holy light, the practical significance was tremendous. If the Holy Church recognized the God of Holy Light's teachings as an omnipotent God of holy light, then the Holy Church would naturally receive his recognition. But if the Holy Church only recognized the existence of holy light and believed that holy light was the source of all power, an existence that didn't have a personality, then the Holy Church would naturally lose all divine authority and become a group of thieves who deceived the world. In fact, it would even be possible to question the God of Holy Light's true existence as a God of holy light. This was the foundational reason why heresy was far more dangerous than evil. This was also the foundational reason why Roland's exhibition in the Northlands had shaken the faith of countless Holy Light job class members. To the Holy Church, this was an even scarier threat than the Holy War itself. That was why after the Cardinals held an emergency conference, the entire Bardi Empire was viewed as a heretic country. Since there was such a major difference in the Holy Church's teachings, starting a holy war was the only option. Without a doubt, the Bardi Empire, which had already been judged as a heretic, was the origin of this heretic church. Not only that, it was a natural ally of the Holy Church. And after the Bardi Empire completely broke off with the Holy Church, and a large number of Holy Light job class members were exiled from Bardi, the Holy Light job class members who seemed to have stayed behind for personal reasons already established a new Southern Church. The pure teachings of Holy Light were now openly spreading. The seeds that Roland had sown back then were already beginning to sprout. Even though I no longer had any memories of the past, just thinking about it made me feel like this was exactly what Roland had done back then. Back then, Roland was someone who had been betrayed by the Holy Light. He was someone who had been filled with hatred for the Holy Light. He was an evil who had been stripped of all his honor. However, he still retained his Holy Knight powers. Just this alone was enough to shake the Holy Church's authority. It would be incredibly difficult to forcefully destroy a religion from the outside. However, internal differences and heresy would be the most fatal. And so, Roland had sown a seed in Bardi. Although he didn't know if it would sprout or not, he wouldn't lose anything by doing it. Your prophecies have all been verified. As the major events recorded in the Holy Bible's revelation were verified one after another, our faith became even more devout, and the doubters returned to being devout. When evil prevailed over justice, we went into hiding as you requested. Fortunately, just as you said in your prophecy, the misfortune in your prophecy can be avoided through our own hard work. At the very least, we've managed to avoid the countless undead portals opening up in the Bardi Empire. Since I wanted to spread my teachings, how could I possibly miss out on the most useful prophet status? I would be able to casually write a series of prophecies, and the Holy Church that treated prophecies as holy scriptures would naturally gain the Holy Church's trust and gradually become stronger. This was within Roland's expectations. Otherwise, he wouldn't have needed to pretend to be a god and make prophecies. Actually, the current Roland was still doing the same thing. He was sowing seeds everywhere. Even he didn't know if they would sprout or not. But what he was facing now was no longer the same immature seeds from before. Instead, he was facing a towering tree that had experienced 200 years of wind and rain and was gradually maturing. When the undead rampaged through the Bardi Empire, the southern sect became Orlos's trump card and most trustworthy target. The Holy Knight and Holy Light priests were the final vanguard against the undead. This was also why Orlos was thanking me so much. At this moment, Glina and Halent were looking at me as if I were a monster. After all, several hundred years of planning and 100% accurate prophecies were far beyond their comprehension. These examples would be treated as myths and epics if they were told in legends, but the actual person involved was right in front of them. We believe that our prophet will be able to defeat the evil lurking in the shadows. Actually, Her Majesty Empress Halent didn't mention the most important title, the founder of the Southern sect, our most devout prophet and guide. What you did in the Northlands 2 days ago made our faith even more devout. We've also begun to openly spread our faith in the Bardi Empire. Perhaps this is the reason why those false god churches that steal the authority of the Holy Light are so angry. All right then, Pope Roland's eyes were filled with devoutness. He believed that this was a part of fate. He believed that the final day of judgment in the prophecy would eventually arrive. He believed that as long as one worked hard, one would be able to reverse all misfortune. However, I was certain that this wasn't the same for Orlos. From the standpoint that a good sword only needed one master, just my relationship with the Southern sect made my existence seem like an eyesore. Perhaps Orlos's current gift was indeed an apology. If I couldn't pass this test, perhaps today would be the day of my death. And at this moment Orlos, as the master, smiled. All right, let's not talk about such trivial matters for now. In order to show our sincerity in our alliance, let's reintroduce ourselves. This is Archduke Halent. Actually, he should be called Halent Milan. He's my nephew, as well as the only legitimate successor to the throne of the Bardi Empire. He's the future Emperor of Bardi. Chapter 4:15. Throw away my sword? Did she really want me to take off my armor and discuss whether or not I was a man? As long as you didn't want to take responsibility, I would welcome that. Cough, cough, things had been quite tense recently, so I should be more careful. Of course, Lasnina wouldn't have thrown away her magic sword for the sake of peace. Her magic sword suddenly broke apart in midair into several hundred metal shards that spun in the air. Sword immortal? Floating cannons? That's ridiculous. Although Lasnina was saying all sorts of things, she was actually on guard. Logically speaking, the attack power of the scattered shards should have decreased. Even if her attack method became more difficult to defend against, it would still be meaningless if it couldn't break through her defense. There would be no foundational difference. However, Lasnina was a famous devil lord. How could she possibly only have such a simple trick? The next instant, something inconceivable occurred. All the shards actually shot back towards her master. Sword shards stabbed into her flesh, causing blood to fly everywhere. Lasnina was also stabbed into a bloody mess by her own magic sword. Countless blood-red runes instantly appeared on her physical body, just like the curse on her magic sword. Her physical body rapidly expanded, and an indescribable power came with it. Curses are the evil intentions of the soul. Jealousy, hatred, anger, and guilt. Words are formless blades, and curses are bloody blades. All curses in the world are nothing but food for me. Lasnina had now completely transformed, and she was now much larger than before. Her entire body was covered in blood and runes. Countless blades were stabbed into her flesh, as if they were made of chains. She also had a sword in her right hand that was more than 3 meters long. If one only looked at his appearance, he was still in human form, but his magic power was completely incomparable to before. An ethereal shadow appeared behind her. This was the abyss of evil that was currently devouring countless souls. This was the home of venomous worms at the bottom of the abyss. I had never seen such impure magic power before. It was rotten, smelly, slow, and countless negative curses mixed together. The entire sky was dyed in all sorts of colors. Waves of evil began to spread, dyeing the suddenly falling rain black. Every single drop of rain was filled with evil, sinful intent. It was as if ghosts were wailing inside. Endless evil and filth polluted the entire world, just like a stinky virus. Just looking at it would make me feel like I was being devoured. Arg! So painful, so painful. When the lizard men below saw this scene, they couldn't take it anymore. Some of them knelt down and vomited, some of them wailed, and some of them instinctively tried to run away. However, there was no difference between the lizard men and the lizard men. As they ran, they turned into skeletons. Those who vomited their internal organs, and those who cried eventually ran dry of blood and tears. The lizard men who reacted quickly blinded themselves and temporarily saved their lives. However, the demonic sound entered their ears, and the stench entered their noses. The best result was that they would be crippled for life. The lizard-man witch doctor, who had just used up his divine power, knelt on the ground and vomited non-stop. Apart from his bloody organs, he also vomited out black and grayish-white human-faced worms. Lasnina was the true form of the indescribable cursed. Curses were the foundational malice of the soul. As the strongest source of malice in the world, Lasnina was able to indiscriminately curse all life and pollute the entire world simply by revealing her true form. Is this the true form of the King of Curses? God, Lasnina was the one who said this. She was now completely covered in blood. Yes, she's so ugly. That's why everyone who's seen her before, there was no need to say anything else. Since she had already taken on such an appearance, she naturally wouldn't stop until she was dead. Did they all sign confidentiality agreements with you? Actually, I know quite a few excellent plastic surgery hospitals. I casually made a lame joke, but I was actually smiling wryly in my heart. Just looking at the size of Lasnina's magic power, she was at least 3 times stronger than before. Previously, she was only 1 level higher than me. Now, she was at the level of being able to completely crush me. I kept having an ominous feeling. Since Lasnina had revealed her true appearance that even she believed to be incredibly ugly, I naturally had to take her down at all costs. As expected of that person's older brother. You're just as skilled at making people angry as him. The Devil Lord who had changed so much felt uncomfortable at every second. She had no intentions of chatting. The next instant, her figure flashed as she attacked. Lasnina's shadow disappeared in the blink of an eye. I could only sense that she was getting closer and closer. Even my soul vision couldn't lock onto her in time. So fast. Before I could even react, Lasnina's sword viciously slashed at my face. Even now, there were no spatial ripples at all. This wasn't teleportation. This was pure physical strength. Lasnina's sword furiously slashed at my body repeatedly. Direct attacks, side attacks, whipping attacks, piercing attacks, sweeping attacks, heavy attacks from the front, hammering attacks from the back of my head, piercing my eyes, piercing my ears, and hitting my groin. Every part of my body was being attacked. It was as if 8 giant snakes were furiously tearing at my physical body. Ahaha! Let's see just how long your turtle shell can last. Lasnina was trying to forcefully break through the turtle shell, as well as test out the weaknesses of this armor. If this was an ordinary man-made armor, there would definitely be weak points, such as connections and air vent. However, Lasnina's attempts were destined to be fruitless. The Guardian of the Night was a defensive armor created from the power of her bloodline. Every part of the armor was created simultaneously. How could there possibly be any obvious weaknesses? Holy light! I had just opened my mouth to say something when Lasnina's sword almost stabbed into my mouth. Lasnina's high-speed attacks were like an endless ocean, coming wave after wave. I had no chance to counterattack at all. And so I decided to close my eyes. Have you given up? Come on, counterattack, you coward! Lasnina's hysterical screams echoed in my ears as she suddenly punched me in the stomach. The penetrative power caused me to spit out blood. But even so, I still grit my teeth and closed my eyes. 1 attack, 2 attacks, 100 attacks, 1,000 attacks. Finally, my dragon armor began to crack. This meant that my regenerative abilities were no longer able to keep up with my destructive power. My dragon armor could completely collapse at any moment. Coward, just hide like a turtle and die. The berserk Lasnina was no longer able to control her emotions. She had tossed aside her original plans. Right now, her only thought was to tear apart this bastard in front of her. But at this moment I opened my eyes. One eye was black, while the other eye was white. The other eye was black, while the other eye was white. It was as if they were 2 halves of the Taiji symbol. Judgment, my words were cold and emotionless, as if I was a supreme god's judgment on the mortal world. It had nothing to do with me or the world. Lasnina was guilty, so I was judging her. My stare of the Hell God had been forced to its limit. I had to use this incredibly dangerous trump card of mine. Lasnina paused when I stared at her, just like a frog being stared at by a snake. Then, the next instant, her entire body started bleeding profusely. It was as if she had just received the punishment of endless purgatory in that 1 second. Nobody knew what Lasnina had seen in that instant. The normally fearless Lord of Curses was now terrified. Her face was completely pale, and all the magical runes on her body had lost their luster. Her sweat and blood mixed together, and she didn't even have the time to stop her blood from spraying out. It was no wonder that she felt so uncomfortable. Ever since the stare of the Hell God was created, it had improved by leaps and bounds. The stare of the Hell God was a judgment that originated from the soul. Every life had 2 sides. If there was good, there would be evil. Even the most heartless individual would have a shred of conscience in their heart. And the stare of the Hell God was a natural talent that could separate one's good from evil. Their conscience would transform into a judge that would judge the evil soul's sins and punish them accordingly. It would be impossible for anyone to lie to themselves. It would be impossible to dodge an attack from oneself. The more sins one had committed in the past, the more sins one would receive in the future. This attack would be unavoidable, and it would be impossible to avoid it. Perhaps only an instant had passed in our eyes. But, in Lasnina's senses, it was likely that thousands of years had passed in purgatory. Sailor, let's go. At the very next moment, Sailor ran away in a panic without a second thought. Sailor, who was at a disadvantage, also unhesitatingly retreated after seeing that even his master had been defeated. Extreme fatigue swept over me. I really wanted to sleep right away. Unfortunately, the gigantic existence above me hadn't attacked yet, so I still needed to be on guard. Snake God Voka. Why are you not fighting, and why are you not retreating? Chapter 4:16. The fact that Calamandas was instantly killed the moment he appeared caused the entire battlefield to pause. That was because he was a main god. It was unbelievable that he had been killed so easily. The Cloud Tower's mages were probably the most panicked of all. They never expected that a powerful main god like Calamandas would be defeated so easily. Even though Calamandas wasn't known for being an expert in combat, his reputation was still far greater than Sophocles, the weakest main god. Bind! With a low roar, all the magic energy that had been torn apart gathered together again and transformed into a physical substance. The magic energy entangled into threads, which then wove into a net. Sophocles' magical web entangled him, which also stopped him from continuing to chase after Sophocles. That's right, continuing his pursuit. Even though Calamandas was ambushed and defeated, it would still be so easy for a main god like Calamandas to die. Berserk magic and divine power gathered together, forming the upper body of a white-haired old man. Although Calamandas was in quite a sorry state, and his lower body had completely vanished, at the very least he hadn't died on the spot. The magical net that Calamandas created with all his might had only managed to trap Sophocles for an instant. But that's enough. My dawn holy sword viciously sliced at Sophocles' body. The darkness main god's defenses vanished under the illumination of holy light. Right after that, my favorite iron fist exploded forth. Meanwhile, behind me, Harlois was hurriedly trying to heal Calamandas. However, it was likely that neither of us had high hopes for her to succeed. Roland, are you really going to stop me? Sophocles' voice was still a mix of voices, but there wasn't a single shred of emotion in his voice. The Sophocles before me was becoming more and more emotionless, and he seemed less and less like a demon. Stop him? Wasn't Sophocles' main goal to invade the mortal plane with his demon army? Why did it seem that killing Calamandas was his main goal instead? Something was wrong with the situation. Not only was Sophocles prepared, he was even hunting Calamandas down? What would Calamandas live for if he killed Calamandas? The divine concept of wisdom and knowledge? I kept feeling that something was wrong with the situation, but my hands didn't stop moving. I summoned my ice armor, as well as my top-quality shield, Omdoroken's Wall of Sighs, which I hadn't used in a long time. I held my sword in one hand and my shield in the other, protecting most of my body behind my armor and shield. I leaned forward slightly, only keeping my sight locked onto Calamandas through the cracks of my helmet. I lightly gripped my sword and heavily gripped my shield as I took a heavy step forward, prepared to react at any moment. This was a defensive stance that every human infantry knew. Although this appearance couldn't be considered handsome, it was the result of thousands of eliminations. It was suitable for the weak to fight against the strong to stall for time. I unhesitatingly decided to use the turtle shell tactic against Sophocles, who was in a bad situation. In the Cloud Tower, numerous mage towers were currently charging up. Compound mega-attack spells were all locked onto the demons before me. Numerous black dots in the sky were getting closer and closer. These were all senior archmages that I had to face directly. All the mage towers in the Cloud Tower were charging up. Compound mega-attack spells were all locked onto the demon before me. Black dots in the sky kept getting closer and closer. These were all senior archmages that I had to take seriously. Since I didn't have much hope that Harlois' healing would be effective, Calamandas should be able to recover some combat strength if he was given some time. At this moment, a melodious holy song spread throughout the entire battlefield. Darkness was dispelled by light, and everyone instinctively looked up at the sky. However, they were unable to look directly at the blinding light. The god of holy light? What's he doing here? This situation was already chaotic enough. Another main god? And the strongest main god at that? I looked up at the sky. Holy light was unable to block my vision. I heaved a faint sigh of relief when I saw the incarnation of holy light. Fortunately, it's only an incarnation, even though it's a main god's incarnation. I was even somewhat jealous. Calamandas truly had a lot of resources. He was casually wasting divine power, and he had already lost several main god incarnations, yet he was casually sending out another one. Although I was slightly distracted, my gaze was still locked onto Sophocles. I could faintly hear what he was saying. He's finally here? The god of holy light was brought here by Sophocles as well? Just what was Sophocles trying to do? Suddenly, Sophocles paused, and his blurry face regained its emotions. It was a rather familiar face, but it had an inexplicably gentle smile on it. He was sighing, just like a mortal who was troubled by trifling matters. As he walked, he sank into worry. Finally, in an instant, he, who was enlightened, revealed a smile of abandoning everything. Everything is for the purest form of evolution. Damn it, why did this slogan sound so familiar? You can't be playing the same trick, right? You're going to play the same trick after shouting the slogan, *boom. A deafening explosion and a world-destroying flash simultaneously appeared in front of me. The powerful main god Sophocles, who had just revealed his true power, smiled as he completed the end of a villain. He shouted the slogan of self-destruction. A main god's self-destruction? Right in front of me. At that moment, my brain reacted slower than my survival instincts. My instincts for danger caused chills to run down my spine. I immediately used the most effective method to save myself. At that moment, I only had the time to throw away my shield, turn around, and drag Harlois into that world. Then, I watched as the world around me turned white. This was no longer a simple attack of divine power. The combination of light and darkness created the most powerful divine power bomb in all of history. However, unlike in the past, this explosion was far too close and far too powerful. Even though I was in my personal bug-like world, the external attacks were still beginning to shatter the dimensional barriers. The dark gray personal bug-like world began to fade as the connection to the Hades was forcefully shattered by the powerful divine power. The entire world in front of me was constantly shaking as it was peeled off piece by piece and finally returned to nothingness. Yomia City. I acted faster than my will. My mage city directly connected me and Harlois, and all of the floating city's mana was used to maintain the mage tower's shields. Even so, the divine power that seeped into my mage tower was still destroying my pitiful foundation. Gales of divine power and dimensional cracks tore at my personal world. My magical shield was like a balloon that had been squeezed to its limit and was making a frightening sound. The entire floating city was shaking furiously, just like an arc of despair at the end of the world. The only thing that was trustworthy was that I hadn't tried to save any materials when creating my mage tower. No matter how fierce the storm outside was, my sturdy magical shield managed to survive. However, I was like a fish left on the shore after the tide had ebbed, and was directly tossed into the mortal plane. By the time everything barely returned to normal, we were in a completely different new world. We were now in an indescribably abnormal world. Multiple main gods had died, causing the dimensional laws of this entire world to become chaotic. Countless dimensional cracks had been torn open, and the original blue sky and white clouds had vanished without a trace. The sky was now a chaotic universe filled with stars. And Sophocles hadn't just taken one or two main gods with him. However, I was currently attracted by a figure who had just arrived on the battlefield. If my inference was correct, he was the true mastermind behind this battle and Sophocles' abnormal actions. Cavendish, just what did you do? Chapter 4:17. Bardi, the Mist Alliance, the Ottoman Empire, and the Mage Country. This was the first time that the four mega-empire factions were working together. This would doubtlessly attract a lot of attention. From a certain standpoint, this was the second strongest faction in the mortal plane. Their every action would naturally attract countless gazes. Yep, they were still the second strongest faction. As long as the Holy Church didn't fail and the God of Holy Light didn't suddenly die, no one would be able to become the strongest. In the hallways of the banquet hall, fairies were running around with cameras in their hands. Passers-by had to be careful to avoid these paparazzi from a mystical world. Accidentally offending them would be worse than offending the king. The king would probably only be able to send you to prison, but these fairies were everywhere 24/7 and could easily destroy your reputation. The most famous, and also the most ridiculous, was probably an unlucky noble. A certain San Antonio count was reported to have willfully slaughtered his own citizens. As a result, he sealed off all the fairies' clubs and intelligence stations in his territory. And then, it was revealed that he had an affair with his son-in-law. Yep, it was his son-in-law. That's right, in that country's nobility circle, being gay was a fashion. And this was only the beginning. When the furious daughter went to argue with her father, new news came out. It turned out that the daughter wasn't the count's biological daughter. The count's first wife had an affair with her personal knight. The two of them were stunned. The father and daughter, who had known each other for 30 years, actually weren't related by blood? Even fairies were able to dig out this information that even the person involved didn't know about. Before the count could even be happy, a bolt from the blue struck him. And that wasn't the end. He then discovered that his handsome son-in-law was actually the illegitimate son of his beloved maid from back in the day. He was actually his biological son. The final result was that the three of them ended up together. If it was wrong, then so be it. This couldn't even be described as how chaotic the nobility circle was. It was more like how chaotic the nobility circle was, to the point where I couldn't bear to see it. Couldn't you all be more reliable? Even the nobility needed to follow the basic rules? You all being so chaotic makes me lose confidence in humans and affect world peace. You can't be like this. That was what Roland said without any punctuation after hearing this news. When this news spread, countless people were just like Roland, spitting out tea and rice. Normal people had once again underestimated the moral limits of humans and how chaotic the nobility circle could be. Another impression of this incident was that the royalty of every country had allied together to pressure the fairies. After all, humans weren't saints, who didn't have a guilty conscience. The fairies' actions made them very flustered. In the end, the fairies compromised. After all, they had no combat power to speak of, and they had offended all the royalty. Even if they were fine, they could forget about journalism. The final conclusion was that the fairies normally wouldn't report on the private information of any country's nobles or royalty. The fairies would have to first submit a report to the country's government for approval before reporting it. Didn't this sound familiar? This was a famous system of censorship in a certain region. Of course, the fairies also received a series of benefits, such as the credibility of the official support and so on. All kinds of publications and newspapers could also be sold everywhere. The paparazzi of the other world were lovable, disgusting, and even terrifying. They also knew that they weren't liked by others, so they didn't need others' approval when they were collecting intelligence. But this time, with so many big shots gathered together, a few of them clashed with the little goblins of the news from various countries. They were used to facing the coldness and disgust of the big guys. What they couldn't believe was that this time, someone actually took the initiative to invite them to report. However, most people left, while I stayed behind. They were all high-level members of every country, as well as powerful individuals that I trusted. Since I met the fairies, I naturally brought them along as well. This time, I was going to have a press conference. Since I met the fairies, I naturally brought them along. This time, I am going to hold a press conference. Actually, I've never been able to understand the main characters of those legendary stories. Since everyone knows who I am, I won't waste any more words. There's a reason why I've been running around all over the world recently and even fought against 2 Chaos main gods. Perhaps you all think that it's still alright, and that the final victory will come even if it's difficult. But let me tell you that that's all nonsense. It's highly likely that tomorrow will be the end of the world. Actually, I had never been able to understand the main characters of those legendary stories. Even though they had worked so hard and gone through so many life and death trials to finally expose the Chaos Main God's scheme to destroy the world, they still decided to challenge the Chaos Main God by themselves and use their lives to stop the Chaos Main God's scheme from succeeding. A legendary hero would at most bring along a few companions to challenge the Chaos Main God. This sounded cool, but why did it seem so stupid when I thought about it? Since the Chaos Main God wanted to destroy the world, why didn't you just publicize the news and let the military and police handle it? Not only would it be safer than risking your life by yourself, it would also have a much higher chance of success. In the end, why did you have to forcefully turn your plan to destroy the Chaos Main God into an illegal private fight? It wasn't like this world belonged to just one person. Since someone was seeking death and wanted to destroy everyone's world, I should hang him up as a target and let him have a taste of the people's war. I don't know what will happen once Cavendish opens up the dimensional barrier. You can all imagine for yourselves. I took out the speech script that I had prepared beforehand and gave evidence. From start to finish, I spoke for more than half an hour. I started from the final decision made by the two goddesses of order and chaos during the immemorial war, all the way until I found clues about a certain Chaos Main God and the Chaos Girls. Previously, I would always describe calamities as the end of the world or the destruction of the world. However, most of the time, it would just be a change in the sky, with a new leader and species taking power. But this time, if things went too far, He would truly be finished. I swore on the holy light that I had a dozen pieces of evidence. I even emphasized the fact that Prophecy Grandmaster Akama had mysteriously been assassinated right after I had agreed on a prophecy date with him. The more I spoke, the uglier the emperors, kings, and dukes' expressions became. I heaved a sigh of relief when I saw how their expressions changed. All right, I tossed the responsibility to them. They didn't intend to die together with the world, so they would voluntarily help me find, block, and assassinate Cavendish. Meanwhile, the fairies backstage were constantly recording this scene with their memory crystals. Soon, the details of today's conference would be spread to every corner of the world through their channels. At that time, Cavendish would finally be able to experience what it felt like to be the public enemy of the entire world. Survival was the most basic instinct of all. Anyone who was sane and wanted to survive would find it difficult to agree with Cavendish's way of thinking. Perhaps even his allies would immediately turn against him. The main characters of those legendary stories aren't that smart. My way of dealing with things is the correct way. Fight to the death against Cavendish by myself? I wasn't that bored. I wasn't like Cavendish, who would always say, as long as you're happy, the results aren't important at all. For me, after putting in so much effort, the most important thing was that the results were good. Actually, with some slight adjustments, it's still the same as in a legendary story. Look, he's fighting against the entire world by himself, and he's the main character who holds justice. Meanwhile, you're the demon king who gathered countless subordinates to obstruct and encircle the main character. The silly cat's retorts were as sharp and swift as ever. It was truly difficult to counter. Every time she retorted, I would miss her cat form immensely. Meow? Meow is cute? You actually have a normal sense of beauty? Yep, it feels great, especially when you curl up into a ball and kick it,